I pronounce you man and wife. Proceed with the execution.
I promised myself I wouldn't cry. With that, welcome everyone to the Chief Seat Critics podcast, where today we are covering the 1951 film The African Queen. With us today we have
Hello, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Sugiki Rider.
I'm Crimson Maroon.
And I'm Sprinks. And if you're listening on the African Queen, well, kind of date yourself there, but you can find us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever that's called nowadays, or whatever's hip with you. Blueski, love Blueski here. And we also have a letterbox to average out graphs and numbers if you're interested in that, as well as the visual side of things on YouTube and Rumble, where you could be watching currently. But if you're more of an audio podcast person, don't worry, there's tons of formats out there for that.
Loads. Yeah, so The African Queen, a pick that Sinister chose from the wheel from last season's recap. The adventure film that was provided.
Crimson, that is correct.
So I guess let's just dive straight into our histories, starting with Sprinks.
Well, Crimson, thank you for making me go first here. I've heard of this film being with its two famous actors in the portrayal of Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn, but I've never seen it until now. I think I've seen the poster before, just like going through the filmography of Humphrey Bogart, and I think that's it.
All right, I'll go next. I hadn't heard of this until Sinister picked it. I do think I've seen the poster. I guess I didn't read the words because I don't remember the name African Queen. So yeah, pretty much that's it. First time seeing it for the podcast. Writer.
Echoing a lot of sentiments here. I know I've seen the poster somewhere before, and I think I knew it was supposed to be a setting in World War One. So did have some of that vague knowledge that came my way, but I knew nothing beyond that.
Alrighty. Well, we'll jump into some facts. Boy, did this movie have a lot of them. So I snagged a couple off the internet.
So
Let's
they're all
start.
true.
100% guaranteed, verified by everybody ever existing. Yeah. With budget, this had a $1 million budget, which I ran through an inflation calculator, and approximately would be 12.5 million today. And then the box office earnings was 10,750,000, which would be about 135 million today.
Crimson, it
So,
made back its
pretty big
funds.
success. Yeah,
Good success,
huge
and
profit
and, and
margin.
was still a by budget film by the standards of today. Doesn't have a bloated budget.
Yeah. And if this was made today, a sequel would definitely be on its way. Based off of that. So let's go with fact number one. Walt Disney used this film as a basis for Disneyland's Jungle Cruise attraction. I'm not shocked when I read that. Seems quite
Crimson, I'm not surprised at all.
obvious. Yeah.
I never made the connection, but now that I've heard it, yeah, it makes sense.
While filming the leeching scene, Humphrey Bogart insisted on using rubber leeches. John Huston, who was the director of this film, refused and bought a leech breeder, or brought a leech breeder to the London studio with a tank full of them. It made Bogart queasy and nervous, qualities Huston wanted for the close-ups. Ultimately, the rubber leeches were used on Bogart, and the close-up shots were of the breeder.
Oh, so I guess that is some of his that's some method act. That's just real acting. It's not even acting. It's just him dealing with real leeches. That's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean,
Dedication by
good.
Houston trying to make it authentic, I guess.
Mhm.
Poor Bogart. Humphrey Bogart won the Academy Award for Best Actor for this film, making him the last man born in the 19th century to ever win a leading role Oscar.
Wow. Now, Crimson, that's a fact. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Because Humphrey Bogart was born 1899 or Christmas Day, right?
I didn't check his birth date. I'll take your word for it, though.
I think
But
it's
pretty cool title to
September
hold.
25th, 1899.
Nice. Uh, Apparently, everybody in the cast and crew got sick because a good chunk of this was actually filmed in Africa. And the only two that didn't get sick was Humphrey Bogart and John Huston, the director, who said they avoided illness by essentially living on imported Scotch whiskey. Bogart later said, "All I ate was baked beans, canned asparagus, and Scotch whiskey. Whenever a fly bit Houston and me, it dropped dead."
That's
That's cowboy
hilarious.
mentality.
That's so 1950s.
Yeah, that's pretty amusing. It dropped dead. And the last fact we'll be going with. Because of the unfiltered drinking water, most of the crew was ill, as I stated, with a combination of son of a gun,
Syphilis?
Uh,
What are you saying there, Crimson?
simultaneous
Simultaneous.
illnesses. Simultaneous. My goodness. According to cameraman Jack Cardiff, Katharine Hepburn was so sick during shooting of the church scene that a bucket was placed off camera because she vomited consistently between takes. Cardiff called her a real trooper in the book, The Making of the African Queen. Hepburn said she rushed for the outhouse only to find a black mamba inside, then ran into the trees. My
Wow.
Wow.
goodness. I stumbled through that.
But you made it
Crimson,
through to the
yeah, are
end.
you sick? You method
Who
acting
knows?
over there?
Yeah. All right. Well, there is the fact section. Let's dive into the actual coverage of the movie. Today we're doing popcorn, so we can jump anywhere in the film. And let's start this one with Ryder.
All right. Um, I will jump to. I guess I was when I because I knew nothing about this film. So when I saw the 1914 German occupied Africa, like subtitle the titles come up for that, I'm like, oh sweet! I wonder what this guy's like. One of my favorite areas to study in history. And this movie has pretty much nothing to do with that. Um, but it still got me. It was still a nice hook. Still a good hook.
Yeah, when I saw that pop up, I'm like, ooh, this is a Ryder thing. And then yeah, it's kind of sprinkled in.
You know what? I'm in the same boat here. I did think immediately history for writer.
Yeah, and I was kind of excited about it too. I was like, oh, all right, World War I in Africa. I haven't really seen any movies on that, so this will be a kind of a fun one.
As far as world wars
Uh,
go, is
yeah.
mostly the Africa War for when World War II is definitely a lot more covered in terms of just like the amount of like documentation and documentaries that are out there and for sources and information.
Mm, okay. Let's go Springs next.
No, thank you, Crimson. I found it a little odd in decision making, and I don't being that Samuel and Rose were English. It didn't. It seemed common, but when they were having that like tea party scene with Allnut, and Samuel is reading a newspaper, he then turns the page from right to left, so he's like reading it backwards, which I found is just a very odd choice to make.
Uh, yeah, I suppose it is an odd way of doing it. Um,
This is going to be
I don't.
really
Go ahead.
weird question. Springs, when have you last read a newspaper?
Ooh, great question.
Actually, that goes
Probably a
for
couple years back.
yeah,
However, yes, they're in their what are they called? Segments or whatever. Like they're rectangles of the story, and then you got the news page, you got the sports page, you got the silly
yeah,
comics. It's like it's not a continual page turner like a novel. Um, but I just found it interesting that it goes the opposite direction for a shot of
yeah.
instead of left to right, right to left.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I only ask because funny enough, there's gonna be people out there now who actually have never read a newspaper in their lives. So, which is really weird to think about, which is why I asked the
Yeah.
question.
And I know sometimes like reading a newspaper, the end thing can't all fit and they're not going to change the font, so they will make it run to the next page. So a
Yeah,
situation like it's not always, I don't know how common that is, but still like turning the page to read, but not the English way. That's why I'm like, is it something with like African newspapers? Is it backwards or just maybe question?
yeah.
Oh, and there's
The,
also the aspect to a newspaper of hunting for what you're interested in. Because usually you don't read the whole newspaper. You look for headlines that you're interested in, or you look for the comic strips or whatever. So he could have been skimming to see what he'd be interested in actually reading.
Crimson, I would agree with you, but there are a lot of cuts between the growling of Allnut to him that it looks like
Yeah, there are.
he's reading everything in that paper.
I mean, he's a pretty fast reader then. I mean, it is kind of a long scene with the freaking belly growling, but
yeah, that is a joke that went on for a bit too long.
I was pondering over the fact, writer, if these rich individuals have never heard the growling of hunger before,
it's
uh,
inappropriate at a dinner
and if that
table.
was the joke they were trying to get across.
I don't. I legitimately think it's just the humor of the stomach growling. I don't think it's that because they're in the middle of a nowhere and kind of a their house looks to be like the most um I guess
Wealthy.
well constructed thing out there. Like it's not a thatch roof that can be easily burnt down. It looks like it was properly made like you would expect to be a more modern house to be made. So I would expect them to know what a that sounds like. It's just weird. It's just strange that they don't like I guess react beyond the simple
Well,
uh
writer, they'd certainly play it off as the joke for how long it goes, of course, but up to Rose then offering more bread and butter and rock cake, which was available the whole time. So if I think it plays into like the humor of a movie moment situation,
maybe.
because if it was available and they knew the noise, why
It
not offer it like at the second point?
it could also be an etiquette thing, but I genuinely don't know enough. All I really have to go on is they intended this. I this is intended to be humorous. It just didn't land with me. Uh, I it works though. I think functionally, because I'm sure that sort of humor works out there for someone. I don't. It didn't personally land with me. Went on a bit too long, I guess.
That's my piece with it is it went on for a long time, and the the story that Samuel was talking about the guy that became a bishop and everything that was irrelevant. That didn't really come into play at all.
Crimson, I
I
agree. It was just small talk.
yeah.
Yeah.
The only relevancy I could think of to the bishop story is that he's jealous that they're back on the mainland being successful.
I suppose it's possible, but it's not really relevant either, though.
No, that see, like I said,
Oh, writer's got a point.
the only relevance to that feeds into his like crazy "I'm dying in bed" speech, where he's talking about a bit of where he's espousing a bit of his life story, because that then would feeds in a little bit into that, like because you can get the sense of how terrible his luck is and how he's not passed his exams and how he is comparatively to other peers in his work in his field of work. So I definitely get the sense that the relevancy of that feeds into his death scene where we get in his backstory, where we kind of get an explanation of why they're out here to begin with. I don't. It's not. That's not a direct connection, but I think there is enough to connect the two.
Okay. I could see the connection. I just don't know if it's really necessary to bolster that. Feel like if the bishop thing wasn't there, it still would have conveyed the same message.
Yeah. I mean, like the main thing is just him just checking on his peers. I think is the action of what he's doing to be interpreted. Can't speak today, which sucks. We're a podcast.
Neither can I, apparently. Simultaneously.
Very good, Crimson.
Hey, I got it. Gosh. All right. Let's go with writer again.
All right. I quite like Allnut's introduction. He's kind of uh, well respected isn't the right word for it, but he's very much approachable by the community. Like he comes to town, everyone knows he comes to town. They all like the stuff that he brings with him because he's just he brings random things from a different sort of world from where he's from.
Oh,
So
writer, no one speaks ill of a mailman.
yeah, and so like them like fighting over his cigarette or cigar and stuff like that. Uh, I think is an interesting way to introduce him as a character. You get the sense of aloofness that he is, and he's also very, very apart from the Rosie and her brother.
Yeah, I think that was a good character introduction for him. Him sitting there watching the church and not directly intervening. Do you think he threw the cigarette intentionally to stop the church, or just coincidence that's what ended up happening?
Crimson, I believe it's coincidence, but I believe it wasn't his intent to stop the church, but just nonchalantly just getting rid of the cigar, and the outcome of it was more entertaining, not only to Owlnut but the congregation as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm kind
couldn't
of in
100%
agreement.
tell, but
Yeah,
it
I'm
doesn't
not
really
kind of in
matter
agreement.
usually.
I don't think he did it on purpose. It's just an effect of what happened.
Hmm.
I will go with that. Rose and Samuel, I don't think are really good teachers at all of the whole hymn singing. That is not teaching people how to sing.
No, you
That's
just
just
sing a song and then they'll eventually learn the lyrics and hop in.
I take that as a couple different things going on. That I don't think they speak English like natively. So I'm still that there obviously there's difference from being able to speak a language and sing something from that language. There's difference in that, but so I took it as big as is the point of it is just to show cultures smashing together, and if it is in what you're reading, Springs, is that they're not good teachers, that might feed more into why the brothers out here instead of on the mainland.
well, Ryder, this little village has a church and not a school.
Yep.
Well, so we find out that Rosie's been at least in Africa for 10 years, but we don't really know if she's been in that village for 10 years, I guess.
All we know is that her brother, she went with her brother. Like her brother is the reason she's out there.
Yeah.
Oh, Crimson, that's a good thing to bring up. Very observant of the people around Rose and Samuel could change. But I feel like that would also go into them more understanding of what works and what doesn't work then.
That's as, like I said, if they spent 10 years here, they could have gone village to village trying to spread the word of God and stuff, right? We don't really know what they did the full 10 years they were here. We just know they were in Africa for 10 years. Even though these
Crimson, that's
natives
great.
do seem
Yeah.
pretty cozy with them.
Ryder,
That's
do you
not
know
enough to
the
say anything.
historical difference of what occurred between 1904 to 1914 that could have happened in those 10 years?
Um, It
in
was
Africa?
mostly the industrial boom, pretty much. That was pretty much the main thing that was happening in Europe. Was the big boom of industry and stuff like that that was happening. As far as like what could have happened in historically in Africa, I'm not sure. My African history knowledge is usually limited to like pre medieval times or post World War II, pretty much.
And Africa, I hardly know anything.
Um, so yeah, unfortunately, I can't answer that question. Not with
That's
any
okay,
great
writer.
detail.
Just I was just curious.
Yeah, no worries.
Springs Point, please.
Of course, Crimson. Let's see. The shot after the village is burned down, and there's many shots in this movie that made me question: was this filmed in Africa, or was this filmed on a set? And the very last thing, like the end at the end of the movie, is like filmed in Africa, and I'm like, oh well, that's good. But at 13:35, when Samuel's out, kind of like tending the burned down wreckage and losing his mind a bit, there's a shot of Rose carrying him back to the bungalow, and the background set is moving at a faster pace than them walking.
That's funny. Um, yeah,
I
no,
didn't pick up
I
on that one.
wouldn't surprise me. I have a few guesses for what was actually filmed in Africa and what was actually filmed in a set because they definitely have worked in a set. It's
Right?
just
Or
this is
any up close shot in the rapids was a set.
yes. Also,
What?
being in the 1950s, and the underwater shots, I actually think they're obviously in a water tank for it, but I actually appreciate the innovation being it's the 1950s, so they got their underwater shots of our characters trying to fix the boat, uh, which is at the time I
I
think
was
it might be pretty innovative to just to kind of get that point across to the audience.
Yeah, I was surprised about the quality about a lot of the stuff in this. Like the shots where the background isn't real, it's pretty solid compared to other stuff I've seen from this time period or a little later. Because usually the background's way out of sync. Like let's see, something we've covered. The Sound of Music, right? There's a backdrop when the uncle's getting driven back into town and the kids are in the trees.
Crimson, good
That
example.
that
Yep.
backdrop doesn't mesh well with the driving, but a lot of the boat scenes here mesh pretty well with the background. All things considered, pretty
Yeah,
solid.
they're
And
not
yeah, the
perfect,
water's
but
good.
they're not perfect, but yes, they do the best they can. I think for the time period, so they're pretty okay. Funny enough, I take more issue with the long distance shots of the boat when they're going down the rapids because
Oh, right, or the model.
yeah, yeah. I couldn't tell if I actually was leaning up. Is this model work? Because I don't think those are people in the boat. Which would make sense.
Uh,
It'd be cheaper to build a
right, or
bunch of
those
models and
are
send them down the
mannequins.
rapids.
They are stiff as plywood.
Yeah, they don't move. They move as stiffly as the boat going down the rapids, um, which is fine. I actually do think it's cheap. It makes sense. It's cheaper to use model boats for shots going down the rapids than rather than risking your actors trying to go down the rapids.
Yeah, yeah, definitely for safety purposes. And even, I mean, those aren't too bad either. I mean, usually they're pretty cheesy looking, and I think that those weren't too cheesy. They didn't focus on them long enough. The shots when they are wide are like a couple seconds, if that. They're pretty short.
Yeah,
Right.
I
Uh,
do. I on those shots specifically, I think they whatever they did to blend the model work into like the background when like because there's some just good wide shots of the model going down the rapids. They still get like in the what would look to be a forest and stuff like that. They got the models of like the scenery pretty well done, or if they've integrated the real scenery into it somehow, that would be another
well,
interesting thing.
I couldn't find it in the facts. I couldn't tell if they were using miniatures or if they actually had like a decoy boat that they sent down the rapids, because that's what I feel they did, because the scenery looked pretty authentic in the water.
Yeah, I was leaning more models because it'd be cheaper, but because of how good it looks, I can see it being a what did you say, decoy?
Playboat. Yeah, but I couldn't find anything to confirm that. But I'm leaning they had a decoy boat. I'm just coining the term for it. I don't know, but
Yeah,
because it looked like it was on
I
location.
got it. I got it. It's
It
the
just had
stunt boat.
dummies on it. Stunt boat, dummy boat, decoy boat, stunt boat.
Crimson, I
So
believe it is both
I'm sure
model work
they
and
mixed around
decoy
stuff.
boat.
Yeah, that would make the most sense. I think they just blend the two variants that they get the best they can, which I think it works. I think for most of the time, like I said, there's only a couple shots where it's questionable, really.
Well, Ryder, there's actually a good shot I had at a 5422 during the rapids when the overhand tarp falls onto Rose and covers her, and Allnut goes to recover it. In the wider shot of the model, the tarp is vanished.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like I said, there's
uh,
there's a couple of those,
continuity.
some similar things like that. Anyway.
Yeah, and there was one. I think I time stamped it, but it'll take too long for me to read and find it. But there was a with one of the rapid scenes, the one where he goes to help her steer. The wide shot is him still at the engine trying
Yeah,
to fix it, and
there's
then it
a
cuts back to him still at the helping her at the back.
yeah. There's also one where a wide shot of them sailing past the fort, where they're it's filmed in a way where they look like they're in two different places, but uh, when we get the wide shot through the scope of the German sniper, we can see that they're in completely different spaces, or at least Allnut is.
Yeah,
Ryder, I agree.
5350. There we go. That was the one I was referring to. But yeah, I think it's all. And I was kind of surprised the how fluid the camera was in this, because this and like older films, they're pretty stationary most of the time, the cameras. And I was surprised how often the camera moved in this, and I definitely liked that.
Yes, Crimson, I think the camera work was actually very good for what they had.
Yeah. And there's some shots where it's pretty good at simulating motion of the water, um, and like
Oh,
the
Crimson,
fake, fake
if we want to
backdrop.
compare it to Apple Dumpling's
The
fire truck
minecart.
scene,
Oh, okay, the
Oh
fire truck.
yeah, they have a fire truck scene. I forgot about that.
of the fight in the water.
Yeah. What? Yeah, the close-ups. Ooh.
Though
Yeah, I
Crimson, I
forgot
believe in
about
the
that.
wider shots of that in the river weren't
That was
models.
Yeah, that was real. Yeah, I forgot about that.
That's okay, Crimson. That movie takes place or was filmed 20 years after this one, relatively, I think. Is that a 70s or a 60s movie?
I think that's 70s. Yeah. Man, then yeah, I guess quality went down in 20 years comparatively to this film, anyways.
That's an opinionated thing to say there, Crimson.
Oh, well, that shot you just mentioned is not as good as the shots in this. But yeah, it is an opinion.
Apple Dumpling 75.
Let's go with writers.
Sure. I'll jump with. I don't actually know her brother's name. I kind of start calling.
Samuel.
I just call
Samuel.
him Reverend.
Okay.
Um, and I'll get a quick point out about him. He his breakdown, for as quick it as it is, I quite like. Because it feeds into. Remember, having read jealousy into the his conversation earlier about the bishop, like getting a new position or whatever. I kind of read it into like him watching his life work get something akin to his life's work getting just swept away in an instant because of the war. So I actually bought into his quick breakdown because it it weirdly felt natural, um, which is weird to say because I as far as character breakdowns go in terms of like psychology, normally it takes like a lot more for me to buy it as a audience member. But I think this one worked really well despite it being expedited. Um, I think it
Right.
definitely tends a little bit onto the cliche side, but this might be a cliche setter for all I know. Because I can't really think of many like at least reverends breaking down like this in stories before this movie.
I don't think it's actually quick. I think this was months because Charlie said he wouldn't be back for months because of the war. And when he came back, the huts were clean. There was no debris from the burning. Um, and the Reverend's bruise on his face was gone in the bed. So I think there was actually months since the Germans arrived.
Oh, okay. If that's true, I might have an issue as to why Allnut took so long. Because the implication that the Germans are after the African Queen, I think would have prompted him to come sooner rather than later. Even
Well,
if he
writer,
said he
did
would.
did Allnut imply more that they were searching and wanting the queen, or that if they found and got their hands on it, it would be valuable? Because I took it as the latter.
Um. Well, he was
I
running
guess that
a.
line's
So
kind of interpretive.
so the reason I don't buy into the months thing, there's a couple reasons. He sails back to his mining group, which he's already found fled. So he would immediately then sail back down the river to potentially pick them up, not knowing what happened. Um, because if it is the latter Springs, it's he was still his life there had already been upended because he took trips to the mining area and he found all his guys had fled.
Writer,
Uh,
you may be confused. I don't mean I'm not referring to the time of like days versus months. I'm talking about the Germans trying to apprehend the boat.
then in that case, that's kind of irrelevant to my point. Whether they're actively searching for it, meaning they would be directly after Allnut, or just if they happened upon it, Allnut would still, in both cases, want to avoid the Germans because he's not a German.
I guess for that line from you, Sprinks, I'm leaning more towards the not actively hunting one, but it is kind of interpretive on how they worded it,
Yeah,
on which way it could lean.
yeah. There's so the main reason I don't buy into the months thing is because I'm not sure what Allnut was doing for the intervening months. I would probably buy a week maybe, but because his life was already upended when he returned back, I don't think Allnut would stay.
Or writer, does Allnut ever state the difference of time between the village to his mining
I
No.
was
camp?
just about to ask that. Um, is the mine in Africa or is it back in Canada?
Uh,
Crimson,
I
it is not in Canada.
It is definitely in Africa because if it was Canada, I have no idea why they would flee from the mine from the Germans.
I guess that's a good point. I'm just trying to figure out why it would take months. Because when he did come back to them, he talked about all the other villages getting burned down. His mine had an incident, and that seems like a lot within a short amount of time. That feels like he's been around the villages and they've been getting burned down. Feels like a larger passage of time.
I'm I'm not fully convinced, but I can definitely see it being interpreted that way. So I'm not. I guess I'm not going to press my point here. I guess it's a little odd. I guess the timing for me, but anyway, the original point is that the breakdown for the Reverend happened quickly. I guess with on screen time, but I think they did enough to convey it making enough sense that I didn't take issue with it.
And Sprinks, what are your thoughts? Is it months or less?
Crimson, I think it's less than months of what you're saying, but I'm also not fully on board with writer thinking a day or two, or the first implication of what it sounded like. I'm leaning a couple weeks. More so for showing the difference of how speed is between Rose and Allnut, and how Allnut's kind of more calmly and takes his own pace and drinks and all this, and Rose is very go 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 throughout the night kind of thing. So without Rose during his, to get to the mining, I'm sure he goes at his own pace, which is a lot slower. But the what you brought up of the debris in the village being gone and the bruise being off of Samuel, I don't think need months of recovery, but a couple weeks can clear that up.
To clarify, I'm in the belief that it's probably weeks, not days. If it was days, I think I would have a lot more problem, a lot bigger of a problem.
Okay. Well, I guess the only I'm not opposed to the weeks thing. It's just the line that Charlie said that it would be months. So now, if it is weeks, I would like to know
Well,
why it's been cut
Crimson,
down.
Crimson, I think at the time he said that to Rose and Samuel is his belief at the time that it would only take or would take that long. Upon the news of his mining camp when arrival and the Germans ransacking it, has greatly increased his time to go back and check. I think that is put dampers, or other villages he's come across before the mining, because it plays very conveniently that as soon as he leaves Sam and Rose to get back on the African
The
Queen, the
Germans just show
Germans
up immediately.
invade the village,
Yeah, I wrote
which
that
could play into
Germans
that
enter
Allnut
stage right.
didn't know.
That's
uh,
funny.
yeah. Okay. Well, I'm trying. I would like a line, and she's not in the mindset, so I don't know if it would fit. But if she's like, "Oh, you're back early," obviously she's distraught because her brother just died. So I don't know if that would fit. But then that would explain why it's not months and weeks, other than having to infer like that. Because I do think what you said makes sense, but something tying it down would be nice.
I think she could, if she were to deliver the line, I'm fine with it. It would just be more of a uh, kind of that subdued British kind of stoicism. Um, because obviously, as you say, she's kind of distraught over um, the Reverend's death, her brother's death. But Rosie is very composed. That's one of her core character traits for a lot of the beginning of the film. She just tries to maintain her composure and that sort of almost Victorian ladylike elegance, I guess. So I can see her definitely saying like as a form of politeness, just pointing out that he's back early. It would definitely help with a time frame, but don't really know.
Yeah, and I, I I like Charlie here in this beginning section. I'm not going to hint towards further because he kind of goes on a little journey. I like how very nice he is. He offers to bury the Reverend to save her from being stranded here because he's under no obligation to do any of this stuff. Uh, so he's a pretty nice guy.
I agree. Don't have anything terrible to say of him. It's just nice of him that he came back for her at all to see what
I'm
happened.
I'm with Ryder. I'm nothing against it.
Let's go with Sprinks.
Yes, I believe this is a movie of its time to do such a thing, and movies back then did this, but it does not blend audio of dialogue and music well. Music very plays off of its own audio track and ends before dialogue begins, and vice versa. And it really plays the music into the emotional tie of a scene or a situation at hand being portrayed on screen, and not the music really plays into a show moment, and the dialogue is very much a tell in this film to me. And it's a little bit of water and oil of how it came across. And a good
Yeah.
example of this is when Allnut comes back to get Rose. It's very musical. It does do, I mean, of also the time of the transitional usages of fades, they didn't have much. The editing software was, cut the film and do what you can to fade to blacks or fade overs. So that's fine, but it does cut from a conversation, I believe, of Samuel passing to then music that feels very tense of the situation, and then a little lighter upon Allnut walking through the burned down village upon Rose, where then the music dies out.
Yeah, I can agree with the sentiment. I wouldn't go as far as to say oil and water, but because this music that does align with the scenes, it does fit the scenes. They're just kind of heightened. Like when he brings out the gin, you get this like sinister music while Rosie's looking at it. So
It's
the
set
music
up.
gives away her view of
Crimson, what
alcohol.
kind of music does Sinister make?
All kinds. Uh, yeah. So the
But
music
yes,
accompanies what's
Crimson,
happening or the mindsets, but it is not as smooth as they do nowadays.
Crimson, I do agree that the music does fit, and it's good music in the scenes that there are, and the Jin example is good. But it also is two separate audio tracks that don't overlap, and that's the water and oil I was kind of going with. It's not the scene of Allnut like yelling at Rose while she's reading the book kind of thing. Like there's no added music to heighten his anger or his passive aggressiveness to lead into that anger. It's just silence. And it yes, it one could say it's all chosen that way, but by how they convey the music in the film, I feel it's not the sense of overlap.
And I guess, what do you mean in particular with overlap? What do you mean by that? Just that the music's going on while they're speaking?
Yes, something like that, Crimson. Of like the example I said of all that yelling at Rose. If music was tensing into that, not necessarily out drowning all Nut's anger, but complementing it and adding to the motion of the scene to someone rather than. But it is played very much in a lot of these instances of the emotions between two characters of the raw anger or raw humor, love, curiosity. That all plays out that way without the accompaniment of music, but the use of music in here is very more tone setting, I think, or complementary to the establishing shots that are being used for it. So I think they're both played very well. It's just the entirety of the film didn't seem to have the blend of both together in a scene.
Okay. I see.
As far
Alrighty.
as my take on the music goes, I'm in agreement with you guys. I think most of the music fits. I mean, the only time where I questioned it, and I'm is when they first arrive at the island where All Night is intending to hide or to wait out the war. Um, there's a sort of it's sort of a whimsical feeling of music, which I it didn't fit tonally for me, but thinking about it now, I could also see it being like, oh, she has hope because she was rescued by Allnut. Like they're now setting off together. So um, there's a bit of both playing into this scene for me. So I can definitely see, I guess, the aspect of where it worked and the aspect of kind of where it didn't. But that was really the only scene where I felt the music was a bit off. I found the rest of the film was perfectly fine as far as music was
Right, or
concerned.
I think I'm in agreement with that. Of that, is that the scene right when Rose like gets with All Nut off the on the boat after they buried Samuel?
Yeah,
Yes, I agree with that writer. Of it's a very sad scene of Samuel's passing and digging a grave. But to me, it getting on the boat with that whimsical sense, even though the emotions of the characters were off, is setting the go ahead and like the prologue's done to the movie. Because something I stand by after seeing this film is I think the main character is the boat.
Interesting. I Do you want to elaborate, I guess, on that?
I don't know how much I want to elaborate on that, Crimson, but it just seems like the music and the action plays and the film going with is focal pointed on the boat. I mean, it's even named after the boat, but it's the introduction of the people of around like the world building sense at the beginning of kind of the supporting characters in a sense of how they go with the boat and work with it, and Allnut's kind of like the sidekick to the African Queen. I kind of saw of like how Allnut helps out the boat and makes it manage and works in their a dependable relationship between the two of them, and Rose is added on, and how that goes, and seeing the relationship between Allnut and the boat, and how she helps out and how they work together as a team, and then end of the movie, the boat's gone, movie's ends. We don't know if Allnut and Rose get to shore. We don't know what happens after. Do they get captured by other Germans?
I have so much
What's
to
the
say
rest of the
about the
story?
ending.
African Queen is destroyed, and you get the end.
Well, the African Queen gets destroyed, and then they get on a boat with Germans, and then the
But
African Queen
Crimson, the
gets
the
destroyed
African
again.
Queen is simply capsized. It's not destroyed yet.
It got pretty wrecked in the storm. It's not obliterated yet.
It's
Yeah.
definitely got some
Crimson,
plot
it's still
armor.
afloat.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I see. A tie back, I guess, to the original point that you brought up, Springs. So it's not that you felt that initial scene was off when the whimsical music started. You just kind of got the sense, all right, now the movie begins, or something like that.
Right or
The
close
next
to
chapter.
it. The music wasn't playing to the characters of Rose and Allnut and the sorrowness of it. It was playing to the movie and to the boat of the start of the adventure.
Okay. I don't know if that fixes the scene for me, but I can definitely see that as an angle. So
Writer, you're up.
sure. I
Crimson, this movie took place in Africa, not Europe.
You're right. But there's some Europeans.
that is true. There are Europeans. Um, I really appreciate the map scene. This is something I will say a lot when I see adventure movies of any kinds, or fantasy movies of any kinds, or sci-fi of any kinds. I like seeing
Willow.
maps. The reason for that is because maps give us a sense of geography, where what the goals of the characters are, where the sense of where they are in the world. So I really enjoy the map scene as our prelude to Rosie getting a bunch of quote unquote ridiculous ideas as Allnut sees it. Um, and I think it just gives a sense of, it helps ground the film and the stakes of the film. Like they have their, and we have their goal, which is the Louisa, but we also have the rapids and the journey to get there.
Yeah. The fortress to go by. Yeah, the rapids, the Louisa. Every hurdle. And Charlie is very aware of the dangers. So he sits somewhere along the lines of dying a dozen times on the way there.
Ryder, I have an interesting question for you.
Oh
I don't know
boy.
if I should save it for the recap.
Uh,
Well, now you're teasing.
well,
I certainly am.
say it, I guess, here, and I'll tell you if it's gonna be a
Ryder,
recap question.
would you consider the Jumanji game board or the Zathura game board a sense of a map?
Uh, mm, the Zathura game board is more like, this is gonna sound weird. It kind of reminds you of the game of Life board. It's not really a map in the traditional sense of your surroundings, but it's a map in terms of plot structure.
What's coming up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the map I'm referring to here is more of a setting related map, while that map is more of a like movie structure map. So I guess by a certain definition,
Ryder,
I
you
could
answered my
consider it a
question.
map. Yeah,
You answered my question. You called them both maps.
yeah. I
That
say
works.
by that definition, I would call them both maps. Yes.
I guess to piggyback off the map point, I like how smart this movie is and how it makes the characters intelligent. I like Rosie and how like gun ho she is on her objectives, and she's a planner, and she tries to stick with them. She tries to work with Charlie with it, and there's friction, but he's willing to help. I like the dynamic here because that kind of dynamic can be annoying to watch on shows and movies if it's not done properly, if there's not the right balance. And I think they found a very good balance between those two character dynamics.
Crimson, I can see that.
Okay.
I will say I
Spring-
agree.
Alright.
I think that having characters be intelligent but not overly so in a this kind of there's probably a few things that I would raise my eyebrows. The fact that Allnut knows what he knows how to do, because he probably knows. He's a handyman. It's lucky he knows a lot of it. What some of the stuff that happens later in this film, but I appreciate the setup that they're both intelligent enough to work through the possibilities of the suggestions and how they could approach each one. So the dynamic, I think, is bolstered by the fact of him questioning Rosie and Rosie explaining a way around it. So there's the friction also feeds into the planning process, which I think works really well.
All right, Spriggs, you're up.
Oh boy.
You're up.
Thank you, Crimson. Good for the clarification. I was about to break out into the final countdown. Um, let's see here. Is I don't know if it changed, and I could have gone back and checked, but I didn't, unfortunately. Is Allnut's anchor a mining pickaxe?
Oh, interesting. I'm picturing it in my head.
The
It's
first
not a
instance it's used,
conventional one.
I thought it was, because it just looks like it's two quick shots, but it's like a string attached to what I think was a pickaxe. But then it's used again as an anchor later, and it has more of the traditional, like the T cross top, and it made me think, are there two different anchors?
Wouldn't be surprised if he had two different anchors. That's fairly common.
I didn't go back to check.
It would be weird if he had an anchor that was a mining pickaxe and then a normal anchor. But as far as having two different anchors in terms of like size and utility, that's not that unusual for a riverboat.
Okay,
If
writer.
one gets snagged, you cut the line and use the other one. So
Yeah.
I just thought the first one was a mining pick, and I went, "Oh, okay, that's cool. He's using the utilities of what he has at hand, or
Like I
commonly
said,
in
if
place
that's
around
true,
him."
that's a little weird, but good for him, I guess.
he's a handyman. He's a mechanic or mechanist or whatever they call them. Let's go with writer again.
All right. I'm. This is gonna be weird. I like how one of the things they do to distinguish the two character voices. I like it's kind of a little bit tying into the dynamic. I like that Rosie again is speaking in that more proper British kind of sense, like "You will do so, Mr. Allnut," or something to that effect. And then obviously, and you have kind of the more handyman, laid back, blue collar sense from Allnut, and I guess the use of their different voices and different languages, different way they speak the same language is kind of entertaining to watch go back and forth in a small way.
Yeah, writer Allnut does not sound like Rick Blaine that much.
Yeah, the class of clashes, the clash of classes,
There you go, Crimson.
clash of classes. Say that 10 times fast. My goodness, Tuffy. I will compliment Humphrey Bogart's acting. There's a reason he won an Oscar for it. I think it was very good, and all I was thinking while watching it, because I've only seen Casablanca of other works of his, and it's just crazy how different he is between these two films. And mannerisms, speech patterns, obviously character, it's all different. Very well done. It's not a Adam Sandler. It's just himself in every movie.
Uh,
Crimson, that is a horrendous comparison.
I funny enough, the actor that's coming to mind right now in terms of movies that we covered, it would be Robert Patterson.
Batman and
Because
Twilight.
he takes on very different roles every time he's acting, which is very interesting, I guess. Because I don't know, it's good. Sign of a good actor is just usually when an actor's playing completely different characters, and makes you buy into it, I guess.
Writer Robert Pattinson's a good answer.
Yeah.
Sprinks.
I like the little detail that they hint with, and Catherine Hepburn does it very well. Of when Allnut explains what they have on the boat for their equipment, and if you catch it, he says a lie saying they only have 2 bottles of gin. But when he brings that up and Rose is fanning herself on the back of the boat, when Allnut brings up gin, she slows the pacing of her fanning down before he continues on with the list of the equipment.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do several things to make it clear that she's uncomfortable with the fact that there's booze on board.
The actress also didn't like alcohol. Found that in the facts too.
Really?
Hmm.
So
Oh,
she
Crimson, that just adds to it.
so she really enjoyed pretending to dump out alcohol.
I suppose she did. Assuming it was actually alcohol, not just water in
That's
a
why I said
bottle.
pretending to dump out alcohol. I assumed it was fake booze. Why waste money?
All right, or we
It,
don't
it's
know.
the
We don't.
50s.
Yeah, that's
John
true.
Huston got real leech breeding wranglers, so
That's true.
Yeah,
You know,
dedicated.
what was the booze budget for this film? Did you find that in your facts?
I'm sure it was like 20% of the. It's 200,000.
right, or less than $1 million.
Yeah, there you go. And more on the intelligence of the characters, like Charlie when he had to go in the water to check the underside of the boat was talking about fancy currents, which is like, okay, that's something that you don't really see a lot of in movies and shows, is characters acknowledging currents under the water, because they're under the water could be wildly different than what's happening on the surface currents. You could get sucked into different areas underwater. So it was pretty cool for them to
Acknowledge
acknowledge
that.
that as something.
Yeah.
Oh,
And a
Crimson, that
lot.
just plays into Allnut being a good boat captain.
Yeah, he is good. He knows where to kick and when to kick. You know. Writer.
Sure. I'll do the night scene, or the first night that they spend on the boat when it's pouring rain. Um, I quite like that there's the initial. I guess it's playing a little bit more into the characters' chemistry. Um, the the initial like hesitation on Alnut's part to kind of go into the small room she's made for herself, but obviously he wants to sleep and stay relatively dry. And ultimately, she's the one who lets him in or allows him back in, but also goes the extra effort of putting an umbrella over him because she's still laying near the edge to give her the best space away from the rain. It's good. It's little things like that I think that are kind of start piling up to, I guess, eventually lead into the kiss that we get later on.
Right, or I think it played into a little well into Allnut's character as well, that upon Rose exclaiming to get out and leave, Allnut agreed and played off more gentlemanly quality than authoritative in the
Yeah,
moment.
and he also
Yeah,
apologized
I wrote
too.
he didn't even retort. He
Yeah,
just went out. He didn't say, but come on, it's wet out. No,
yeah,
he
yeah.
just
And he
walked out.
also apologizes too as soon as he gets cozy, starts getting cozy for scaring
Yeah.
her and stuff like that. Which is, it show again. It's reinforcing the trait that he's a good person uh, at heart, from being one to go back out there to, even though he didn't have to get her.
Yeah. All
Writer,
good
good
qualities.
points.
Mhm.
This scene does have the one like glaring audio thing to me, and that was the umbrella didn't make any sound. Everything else in this movie has like Foley, but the umbrella was silent when she popped it open.
Crimson, I didn't catch that, but I can believe it.
You know,
Drowned
yeah,
out by the noise of the rain.
potentially, I guess, but umbrellas can be kind of loud when you pop them. Asia Sprinks.
I see what you did there. Clever, Crimson. Clever. Um, so I was questioning it, and then it's pretty confirmed that Allnut is drinking river water. How long does he have to live?
I mean, it's not an you're instantly dead, but
No, but
you don't want to
Rose's
do
tea
it.
is actually boiling it. Sure, there's a little rust in it by what Allnut says, but at least that's boiled and cooked. Allnut just half a glass of river water, a little bit of gin.
Maybe the gin kills it. I don't know.
Uh,
To answer your
Yeah,
question,
alcohol could kill the bacteria. That
yeah,
could be something.
I took it to the impression that he was, at least from, I don't know, maybe it was just shot weirdly, but I thought he was taking drinking some river water and then he immediately followed it with a bit of gin, which might be purposeful to on his part, for all I know.
well, the first instance, I think the first rapid survive. They first survive and they celebrate. He pours gin, drinks it straight. Then he dips his glass over the boat empty and lifts it up and it's half full. And then pours a little into that. And I went, oh, that's river water then.
Wait, do you say he pours gin into the river water?
Yes,
Okay,
into his glass at a point.
that's
But
That'd probably purify it.
better. Yeah,
possibly,
like I said,
the
I do think he still would die eventually, but I think that helps at least put that off as a problem.
okay. The other one I caught was at 40 minutes 40 seconds, and I feel like this is a Crimson Eye thing to catch. But we see Allnut put the glass in the river and take it out, and puts it down on the bench while opening the gin bottle to pour into it. But the shot leans up to like just above his waist, so the glass we can't see in frame. And Allnut reaches down to pick up the glass and drinks out of it. But from the river going up to stop that shot, there's a second glass on the bench, and the movement of his hand is not lined up to where he placed the first glass. So to me, he didn't drink river water. He drank the second glass that was there for him to drink out of.
I guess potentially the Crimson Eye did not catch that.
He might,
I found it a very clever shot.
yeah, he might boil the water for himself too, but he just like for at least in the case of the gin, he just wants cold water because it's probably it comes across that it's hot out most of the time.
Ryder, it's yellow.
Yeah.
Drinks it.
Also, the
Oh.
water at the rapids would be cleaner water than up the stream.
Yeah.
So those are better odds for survival, I guess, because one cup isn't a guaranteed death sentence. I mean, just think what happened before humans boiled water. I mean, they didn't just drop
And
dead.
that's true. And
So
it could also play in that upon the time of Allnut coming to Africa, was very sick for a week, but was grown immune kind of to it and has lived off it for a while.
sure, you could have a sense of that. Who knows? He could have a parasite in him, but it could be a non-lethal parasite. Who knows?
It's weird
But
reading about. I studied parasites, or I studied parasites in the body as far as diseases go. There is actually a lot of as equal to amount of harmful parasites that one could ingest. There is also an equal amount of more mutualistic parasites that you can ingest that would help you feed on specific forms of bacteria and stuff like that.
also known as symbiotic parasites.
But,
Alrighty, I think that was a Sprinks, so we'll go with our writer.
all right. Um. I think I'll jump to plot armor. It is plot armor that none of the people shooting at the boat seem to hit the boat.
I have no idea what. I wrote, "What's this boat made out of?" I mean, it does look like it's made of a metal, but that was a lot of bullets.
Yeah. I mean,
coming
like
at
if
it.
it was made out of metal, I think I would have heard more shearing. You know.
Yeah, ricochets, shooting, and anything
Well,
really.
Ryder, we did see a couple guns jam, so it's not
Cool.
a lot of firing.
That
But
one guy.
yeah,
We could. The sad thing is, we could probably go through the scene and count more than 10 shots. It's quite a bit.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of shots through the whole scene.
True. It other than the German soldier himself who's lining up the sniper,
Yeah.
it could also go into that these are the soldiers' first times firing these weapons.
Yeah,
That was going to be my defense for it
that is
because
my read of it
they
as well. It's still plot armor. They don't land anywhere near the boat because I don't need them to hit the characters, but just to
Well,
get.
Ryder, they do get a couple shots on the steam vent
Yeah, maybe. So,
because
but
there's a
I
shot of a
I don't know if that's
hole
I don't know
going
if that's what they
through
were
it.
ordered to shoot at. To be honest, that might be. Um, but yeah, my that's also my defense of the room in the sense of it felt like they were using them for target practice because they're not as familiar with these weapons yet. Like they're being trained up.
yeah, because they said Charlie said the natives were going to be trained to be soldiers. Uh, so that who knows? That could have been some of the people from the beginning of the movie. I didn't check go back to see
Ooh,
if
Crimson, that's
they're the
possible.
same guys.
Yeah. And Ryder could play into that they're not going to waste live rounds of, or just any rounds of practice. So upon a situation like this, then it's like open fire. So like all they were taught was how to pull the trigger. But also, what is the accuracy necessarily of these rifles at the time for that range? How skewed would
Wasn't
that
too
be?
far.
Uh,
I mean, they had rifling rifles. It wasn't
yeah, I
like
mean,
a musket. So
accuracy in rifling has been only going up since the 1860s. We're past musket balls.
yeah. So
Um,
I would imagine at this range it would be fairly accurate.
yeah, I like I said, it's kind of it's not like a. I don't think it is like a takes a lot away from the film. It's just a note of plot armor, so it's just a minor thing for me. It's not doesn't like break the movie, obviously. Uh, because I do think there's inferences you can make. They're obviously raw recruits. Um, and obviously, in the case of the German officer, that was explained away by Rosie in one of her earlier plans.
I mean, you could use that for all of them. The sun was in all of their eyes, right? 'Cause that's what she
Crimson,
said.
that's true. That is
Uh,
some fake looking sun.
uh, uh, with the German guy or with
The
the
German
troops.
the scope
Okay,
shot.
yeah, yes, that is quite artificial.
And Ryder, another thing to add in, they were shooting a moving target. Not easy.
No, it is not. Like I said, there's a lot that goes into it, but it was more of a. It's still plot armor because it's accuracy by volume.
Yeah, there was a lot of shots,
Yeah.
Like if they fired
and
at
yeah,
only
the
like 2 or 3 shots, I wouldn't have any issue.
Ryder, I'm not trying to clean up the film of it. I'm agreeing with you. But
Okay,
yes, it's
all
a
right.
plot issue.
and then yeah, the sniper very convenient that the sun hit just at the time he was ready to start shooting.
Crimson, yes, another
Yeah.
convenience into these
But
characters.
hey, one could say because there is some religion associated with this, that could have been God
Crimson,
protecting.
what?
Huh?
Is this a segue you're making there, Crimson?
I don't think so, but I guess we could talk about religion
All
in
right,
this.
Crimson, I'll take over for here. I think the Christianity and religion of Rose drops out of her character throughout the movie of what it kind of starts and establishes her as.
I suppose. What do you feel she dropped that would have been relevant?
Crimson, I believe Rose is far more patriotic than she is religious.
She is very patriotic. Yeah.
Rose's
Um.
plan is to go blow up a ship and kill people rather than forgiving and escaping to um and it plays into Allnut being, a liar or a coward into not defending his home or country, but he says he's, Canadian. Um but just into like Rose's whole plan to kill people and make makeshift torpedoes to blow them up rather than a more like Christian way. And it doesn't come back till like way at the end of the movie where she starts praying.
Right. You've got to remember Christianity is a religion. I mean, you got the Crusades where they killed in the name of Christianity, right? And that goes through all of history with a lot of religions. But Christianity, a lot of people have killed in name of Christianity. So I don't find that as
Y-
completely divorced of
Yeah,
her
no,
mindset here.
no. I That's true. The history you're saying there, Crimson. It just feels like that's not her portraying that aspect of it. It seems far more patriotic in what she's saying to England and her homeland, and about this war of what's going on, more so than into the religion of how to stop more people from dying, kind of thing. I don't. It just seemed like kind of a shift in an early on one to go with the plot change, and then it kind of aided into that new character of her with the adrenaline junkie kind of added in of the rapids, and I went, okay, this is deprived of that being a very church lady gospel singer, but it just seemed very kind of like beginning of the movie. It's apparent, and then this whole change on the boat until the prayer kind of at the end.
I will agree that it takes kind of a backseat. I mean, she does like read. She was reading the Bible on the boat, right? Uh,
Yeah.
that he asked to read
I
aloud.
Crimson, I don't know. I don't know if that was a Bible.
Because I think Charlie talked
Whatever
about
Rose was reading,
needing faith or
yeah, Allnut
something.
said he read it before, or his mom read it to him.
Yeah,
I'm leaning that it
looks like
was
the
the
Bible, but
Bible
I
because
don't.
it makes the most sense of the book she would bring, given her life as a assistant to a reverend.
But I agree. It does kind of take a backseat to the patriotism that she pushes forth. Let's go with Sprinks.
All right, at 40:25, there is a instant shot, and it's played off fairly well, I think. There's another one later that's way worse, but this one plays off okay. Where Rose, I think it's right before the celebration of drinking the gin, places her hand on her hat and like kind of like an oh my gosh, like we did it, like survived the rapids, and it goes to Allnut like smiling, and it cuts back to Rose whose hat is now gone. So it could play off that in the instance cutting to Allnut, she took her hat off, but by how quick it is just an instant gone, and there's no shot or showing where the hat is. It's not in her hand. It's not on the bench.
Well, does it stay off or does it come back on?
It comes back later, not in this scene, but it comes
Okay,
back later because there's the other celebration after the crazy Rapids survive where Allnut kisses her and takes her hat and just throws it overboard.
yeah. Because if it was like have it on, cut away, cut back, it's off, cut away, come back, and it's on, then I'd say yeah, that's crazy. But if it's open ended to she just removed it
It's
and it doesn't pop back up there,
Yes, it's
then
open and it plays off believable in in the scene, but it's so fast that when it cuts to Allnut, it would be like a quick change kind of moment of Rose, which doesn't seem normal of her like quickly getting her hat off in like 0.5 seconds if it's real
yeah.
time to be believed. But the worst instance I have is hopefully I wrote it down, but the when they anchor, I think it's after the mosquito scene, and Allnut has a cigar in his mouth and he takes it out and he's talking, and it then cuts kind of I think to like an over shoulder of Rose, and the cigar is back in Allnut's mouth,
Hmm.
and it's during the mid sentence of him talking because he's talking normally, I guess full mouth open, and then it goes to the cigar talk where he can't move his teeth in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah, that's true.
Uh, 1 hour 31 minutes 20 seconds. That's where that is.
I'll jump to my favorite camera shot slash work, which was after they repaired the boat with the shaft and the propeller. You get the shot of the boat turning around and the camera is wrapping around the front of the boat. I, thought, I was like, this shot seems out of time. I feel like this doesn't feel like a 50s shot. Uh, I liked it. It's kind of simple in today's standards, but I was surprised to see something like that there.
I think I agree with your sentiment.
Crimson, I know what shot you're talking about. It's a decent shot. I don't know if I would say it's my favorite one, but it's a shot of they fix the boat and it backs up and then it goes forward, kind of like a 3-point turn for a boat.
Yeah, and the camera like goes around it, so they end up passing the camera.
Yeah, Crimson. Okay.
I
Yeah.
I find it funny, and again, it feeds into the character dynamic. I like that Allnut's plan was to take Rosie down the rapids, and hope that the rapids would be what convinced her to not do the rest of her crazy plan. But she enjoyed the adrenaline rush so much that it backfires into his face.
Yeah, Ryder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, adrenaline junkie was appropriately coined there.
Yes.
Sprinks. I never dreamed of a mere physical experience could be so stimulating.
Oh, Crimson.
Wow.
She has not gone through a lot of life then.
No, other than Samuel's sermons or whatever she said. Crazy. Or darn it, I forgot what he said.
Well, Crimson, we know how good you are with quotes. So
I'm great. I'm great with quotes. All right. She's cracked. There we go. Rosie, you're cracked. Funny.
if I
And
could take
go
over
ahead.
for a little, just looking through my notes, I brought up earlier about the music and
Mhm.
the oil and water like mix in. My example was Allnut yelling at Rose reading, I guess, the Bible. What they do play well, though, even though they're not overlapping, but they're distinct, separate audio clips, is in that fight of Allnut when he's yelling. It pauses him to like collect his thoughts a little, and you hear the roar of an elephant. So it's like the jungle's voicing him, and then when he finishes his argument, the jungle just comes alive with noise. So it's like he's like the voice, kind of the jungle, or like they're complementing one another, but they're separate voice or separate audio tracks.
Yeah, he said, "You call yourself a Christian, huh?" And then yeah, all the animals start freaking out in the background. The music, the sounds of them.
Yeah, the noise of the animals start rising around them. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, I think the implication is that to me, is obviously to imply that not all is well, in the sense that the animals are adding to the tension.
Yeah, I think that's a factor with them. Yeah. Let's see. Writer.
Sure. I'll jump to the pouring out the gin scene. I kind of saw this one coming. Um, so it's like right before I guess the scene you guys were just talking about. Because in their argument he gets drunk and he does say some uh things, and it kind of gives her the excuse to get rid of the gin. And he's too hungover to stop her. Um, Feeding more into the dynamic of uh arguably like, oh, what's it called? She's making him better whether he likes it or not, kind of, I guess, would be part of the dynamic.
Forcing growth.
Forcing growth, yeah.
Yeah.
That sounded like a half. Yeah. Did you have more to add to that?
Well,
Spence?
Crimson, just like the forcing of it, just to go with the plot of the movie kind of thing.
I suppose.
You have to
Well,
remember
the
that
last
Sprinks
bit.
likes his rugged characters to stay rugged.
Ryder, that's not entirely true.
Now, that's very true from a lot of your characters that you like.
Sprinks. I mean, it's a bold claim by Ryder. Do you have an exception?
Um, no, Crimson, not what. Well, one,
Recap.
I get no Crimson. For we haven't covered it is the thing. So the first one that comes to mind is James Sawyer from Lost.
Yeah, I guess he does kind of lose his ruggedness a bit on that. All right, that's an apt one to bring up. I'll give it to you.
Yeah. The other example was going to be Jim Hopper from Stranger Things, but season 3 is
He
quite
kind of
different.
shifts around. Yeah.
Anywho, something I find that actually made me laugh, I'll say, and it was not intended for a laugh in this film, was the white river rapids after being sniped at. cutting between the set water shots of the B-roll footage on the screen behind them, and then the model shots being two different colors of water,
Yeah,
of
that
one
was
being more
funny.
yellow and one's like a blue, almost like it's dusk of night kind of look.
Yeah.
I just found that was so funny that they're playing off
Uh,
those as like the same time scene, and they look like they're totally different times a day.
I suppose so. I think my funniest not supposed to be funny scene would be I guess I'll call it the waterfall, the big drop that they went on, or a large rapid,
Yeah, they were just
whatever
enjoying
you'd want
life
to
and they
call it.
just hear it coming.
Listen, what's up? Ah!
Well, Ryder, they can't blend the audios. They have to stop talking for it to play.
And it just seemed like they built it up to be this big thing that happens. They drop a little bit, and then we cut to the recovery of them down there.
Yeah, like
oh,
we don't
what's the
see
damage?
the drop.
What's the damage report? So that felt a little underbaked compared to everything else in this. That it kind of just felt shoehorned. We need another obstacle to throw at them, and not fully realized.
Yeah, I would agree with that
a
because
little, but what I find unbelievable and plays into the plot armor a lot is through two instances of rapids and a waterfall, none of their cargo goes missing.
Yeah, I can give you that.
yeah,
It's not
They're not-
tied
they're not
down, and
tied
it's
down
just
or
kind of
anything.
Yeah.
loose at the front of the helm.
yeah, the quick fix would be to would just be to show that it's tied down underneath the tarp or something,
Yeah, which it's not.
which is
So
not. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with your assessment, Crimson. This one felt a bit more on the forced end, but I think for me the undercutting of it would happened because of the it was undercut because they they don't really show like them going down the waterfall. They just kind of show the boat at the bottom having survived.
yeah, didn't feel fully realized. And with the repairs, I liked the damages that were taken. They were believable. That the propeller and the shaft broke under it. Believable. Uh, the repairing though is too unbelievable to me. the
It was a
that
very easy fix.
they got it hot enough to fix, and he just put the two together and started hammering. That's not how you would repair that. And you see the finished product by the end, and it literally does just look like he put them together and hammered it. There was no
Crimson, you're right. The
melting point.
hammering would be a flat piece of metal and not a curved blade for a propeller, which is what it turns into.
Well, that wasn't the point I was making, but I guess that also applies. um, and I found during my facts that this would have been a bronze propeller, and you would need a hotter source to melt it. Nothing I would have gleaned from watching because I didn't know that was a bronze propeller, but apparently that isn't realistic part of it. And
Interesting.
What did
I
Rose
wish
make the
Go
bellows
ahead.
out of?
she's
Yeah.
creative. I don't know.
Yeah, she said she actually lists them out about a way to makeshift the bellows, but I don't remember what she said it was. I do like the charcoal fire pit. I think that would work to get for some simple repair work. I don't think it would work on the bronze propeller, but I do think that is hot enough. That would get hot enough theoretically to allow you to mold something very simply.
I wish we got to see the shaft's damage, like by the fire, because it looks fine. Oh well.
The problem I had with the blacksmith a little more, Crimson, was when Allnut takes the first bar out to hammer it. The leverage he has that bar on that rock is so awkward. He's not.
It's
He's
true
gonna
though.
whack it, and it's gonna like hit him or go flying off into the jungle. He needs to hold it by the neck, not by the tail.
Well, the neck's the hot spot.
Well, then the center, then Crimson.
That's also hot.
But he's not holding it with his hand, Crimson. He's holding it with like whatever he's holding it with, the pliers.
I
He's
agree.
not going to melt the pliers.
No, I agree with you. Sprinks, you want to go next?
Oh, Crimson, I definitely could. You brought it up how most of the set looks were fine. I think the hippo one really plays into like, wow, what a set, because there are shots of the water making the boat look higher or lower from the river base it's at, giving the boat height with how it's shot. They try to line it up well, but it does change like how high the boat is off the water. And again, with these shot, they play it very well with the rapids ones because it's darker, the water behind them and the constant movement and the water splashing over the foreground to kind of really blend it all in. But this hippo and the mockery and the monkeys, the being that it's a light background, the light of the background is silhouetting around the actors, which really plays into the depth of it not looking great.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And that was the standout because of the outline around them. So no disagreement on that one.
I will jump to, I think probably my favorite. I think it's intentional comedy, though it could have been ad-libbed for all I know. Um, the morning after they kind of become a couple, um, where Allnut's pretending to sleep and she's making him breakfast in bed. She spills the tea at first, which I thought was hilarious, and I find that kind of endearing to characters because that sort of stuff happens in real life all the time. It's not You have to take joy, I guess, in the tiny little like mishaps that happen um, between you and your significant other. And for me, I guess I just really enjoyed that aspect playing into the dynamic of she wants to surprise him, so he's pretending to be asleep, and also the fact that she just accidentally spills some of the tea. So there's a lot of little, I guess, cute stuff happening. As far
Writer, I
as
think it was played for the comedic bits a bit,
yeah, I definitely
and the
think
cuteness.
it's definitely played for the comedic bits, the cuteness, stuff like that, and I actually think it adds a lot to the characters and good stuff. It's kind of stuff that helps me buy into the romance a little bit more.
Yeah, the only thing that was a little off to me was her calling him dear, like the next day. It's like
Yeah, it
a
happens.
bit quick to say that.
Yeah, like I would imagine I would have liked to I guess see her call him Charlie first before Dear.
Well, Crimson, you won't believe this, but they get married the next day after that.
Oh, is that true? I don't think that's true.
Yeah,
Because
it's a couple days after
they
that.
spend weeks in the reeds.
They spend weeks there.
Yeah, that was
Oh,
a line somewhere.
You know,
But
Crimson,
yeah,
the day time thing is off for me in this, which plays more into my objective.
do you want to dive more into it?
Well, we've touched on it a little, Crimson, of between yourself and Ryder and me of kind of just the pacing of this movie.
Okay. So okay, I thought you were saying like time, but you're saying the pacing of it.
The time plays into the pacing as well, Crimson, of what is being depicted of um, time change or how that's affecting the characters, or the month thing we brought up possibly of how long Allnut was gone or how long they're in the reeds now, and that does affect the pacing of what the characters are going through to portray in the film.
Okay, I guess I just separate pacing from in-universe time, because to me, pacing is what an audience is going through and what is portrayed in a movie, and that's kind of divorced from time because time can be whatever in a movie. Well, I guess That was my confusion.
Oh, Crimson,
But I actually know.
I see what you're saying, but it also plays into I can't have them being like, "Oh, we've been in the reeds for a year," and they're acting and playing off like it's any other day, like they've been there for a week, like they're used to it. To me, that's a pacing issue. It needs to come across that, yeah, they've been here for a year, kind of thing. If that's the instance of the example.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that a pacing issue. I'd call that a time issue, which is, I guess, our difference with what pacing means. Um, okay. Let's go with writer.
All right. Um, I quite like the. This is a more subtle thing for Rosie. I like that at a certain point he does trust her to drive down some light rapids that occur in the film. So there's a point where she just takes over driving for a majority of what's going on. He runs like around with the engine and stuff like that. So I guess I like the small character shift that happens in which that's the implication being that she got really used to driving the boat over the course of them traveling down the river.
Yeah, so the first one he takes over the rapids, and then the second one she starts with it, and I found that a little off because the second one was like the big dangerous one that he was afraid of and telling her about it. So I found that a little odd that she was already at that instead of the other way around at that particular moment.
She was the one that was driving them around the fort, right? Well, until the engine got hit.
Yeah. No, I'm fine with her doing the normal like safe stuff, but he knew this was coming up. So I would have figured he would have been like, all right, this is coming up. Let me take this. Um, but we didn't get that. Um, so I think that would have been nice if he's like, all right, we got the big rapids coming up. Let me take over. She's like, no, I got this or something.
I
But
mean,
that scene isn't there.
yeah, maybe. I thought it came off to me as like they hit the fort or they and then immediately hit the rapids right after, so he didn't have the time to transition to between spots.
I don't think it was that short of a turnaround. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think, Sprinks?
Crimson, I I don't know if it was the quick of a turnaround.
Maybe I'm thinking of something else, but uh, to me it was quicker as a turnaround. So I don't know.
Okay, could just play into you, writer.
Yeah, could just be playing into me. That's just what I recall. I remember them going through the fort and then immediately hitting the rapids or some very fast water right afterwards. Might not have been the rapids, but they definitely hit something.
Well,
Um, Go ahead.
writer's right. After the snipers is the second water rapids, but there's a pause, kind of talk of Rose and Allnut because Allnut says there's no way, no possible way we are going to do that or survive that. It's crazy. So there's that like break part. It's not immediate.
That's the
Okay.
part where she calls him a liar. Is that a different spot?
That
I think it's also that
this is
because
the second
Crimson
rapids, right? After the
right
fort.
before the second. So you have the fort sniping writer, then this talk of I believe Rose calls Allnut a liar because now he's saying he's not going to Louisa or not going past to survive the second rapids, and then they go on the second rapids.
Okay. I don't know if I remember that then. Well, I know I remember the second rapids. I just might be there. I might be placing them wrong in the movie because I don't remember the break between the fort and something else. So maybe do they just get around the bend to get away from the fort and then they park and like or they park downriver and have that talk? Because if there's a break there, then I don't have an issue. Or I mean, I guess
Yes,
I'm
writer.
on your side. I don't I there is a bit of an issue that he didn't take over for the large rapids.
Yes, there's a break. I don't think they anchor. I just think they turn like the engine off or something,
Okay.
and then the waterfalls later. That's after the hippo mockery scene, all that.
Okay.
I have a question regarding the torpedo.
Ooh, Crimson, I might have an answer.
So he explained with this gel explosive, I think is what he called it, that hitting it won't do anything, shooting it won't do anything. You need an igniter or something like that. And his solution was to have it get shot. So now I'm confused.
Oh, Crimson, where you're confused is that Allnut's a liar.
But we see the boxes get shot by the guys at the
Well,
German
Crimson, they
fort.
they shoot the wood corners. They don't shoot into the box.
I think there's a one that is directly in the middle of the box, so a hole in it. Um, so I didn't know if I missed something about the ignition device, or that was just incongruent with what's been stated and a flaw.
Uh, it's incongruent, is what it is. The
Okay.
they the ignition device works independently from the explanation given that getting shot will set it off. So it's an inconsistency.
Okay. Then yeah, I
Possibly,
guess that's it.
Crimson, maybe it's not the bullet of the metal upon impact, because Allnut says like hit it with a hammer, probably won't go off. Maybe it's the pressurized gunpowder going off inside. That's like a heat conduit to the torpedo.
Oh, let's see. I'm trying to picture what the tip of the torpedo was. Would that have made it into the area with the explosives, or was that have been outside of the tank?
Well, Crimson, it looked like the two separate blocks of like wood or whatever, and upon pressing the top bit, would hammer the rifle round. They look pretty big bullets. Hammer the rifle rounds into the
Okay.
inner casing of the oxygen tank, but that part of the bullets was attached to that bottom piece of wood, which was inside. I just don't know if it's airtight. They did screw them on.
Mm, I
But Allnut
guess
never said
that
anything
could
about
have
heat.
been something. He said some. He said like an ignition, and I guess that could be the ignition. Not. It's not the bullets. It's the firing of the bullets that trigger it. Maybe. I don't know. What do you think,
Crimson, I'm not an
Ryder?
expert
You
on
think that's
torpedoes.
I don't even know if that constitutes a torpedo, really.
Honestly, for me it kind of set they didn't make a torpedo. They made them just really large mines that are shaped like torpedoes. That's kind of what the mechanism comes across to me as, which I think makes more sense in universe for what they're attempting to do, which is they need to lodge the torpedoes against the hull of the Louisa, and that needs to set off the explosive. So that to me comes across more as a mine than a torpedo. So there's still an impact, but it needs to be a softer impact because obviously it's not going at a like torpedoes aren't going at like 5 to 10 knots. They're going at the knots of the boat.
I think
Ryder, that's
the
true, but the boat's going 12 knots.
Right, but it's
yeah
still a
the
mine. The torpedoes are still stagnant.
But Ryder, if it was reversed, would it be the same? Like if the Louisa was stationary and the torpedo was going 12 knots?
I presume it would still function the same. Yeah, based on what I'm given, I would assume that it would still function the same. They function more like mines to me than they do torpedoes. So
I agree. I
you
agree
just
with
need
that,
enough
Ryder.
pressure
They're
to
not
push
moving.
two pieces of wood together.
yeah,
We don't know how much pressure is required for that. We know it's strong enough to get hit by waves and didn't trigger them.
yeah,
Uh,
It's
waves
a
can be quite
situation.
heavy.
It's a situation, Crimson, where if a human being is standing still and a car is going 50 miles per hour and hits them, it's going to hit. But if a car's stationary and a human's going 50 miles per hour, human's still going to get hit.
Yeah, I guess that's one way of putting it. Uh, could the
physics is funny.
torpedoes could the torpedoes have been on top of the boat and not punched holes through the boat for?
Crimson, that brings up a good point. How'd they punch the holes?
Chris, you bring up a good point. How did they not sink through the holes? Because I'm assuming
Oh,
those
right.
aren't
Or that's a
Arctic.
great point because they bring that up when they're trying to get to Louisa that they're taking on water because they have 2 holes in their hole.
Well, because the storm that came out of nowhere caused some turbulent water.
there's a lot of storms
Oh,
to happen
Crimson,
here
that's
in the latter
interesting.
half of
Wouldn't a
this thing.
captain know not to sail out in a storm?
Well, they are on a clock. Uh, he said they'd be back on Wednesday, which was uh 3 days after what they said. So they were sitting there for 3 days waiting for the Louisa to come back. So if they didn't this time, they'd have to wait longer for it to come back, and they're already low on rations. So it's kind of a desperate need to do it now scenario.
Crimson, I still don't know how they made holes in their ship.
I don't know, but I also don't know all the equipment they have on their ship. So it's possible with something. I just don't know what they would have to do it.
I would have liked to see the toolkit, but I can infer that they have one. It'd be weirder if they didn't.
But right, the tools are never brought up. The whole of the movie.
I mean, we see some of them for the blacksmithing scene, but there's definitely not a like. They're not directly pointed at, if that's what you mean. Yeah.
I mean, Rose uses a hammer, I think, at one point, putting up the flag.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and he's also hammering
But he
at
can't make a
the
hole with a hammer.
propeller. No, no, and not with his metal boat either. So,
Yeah, that would take a degree of equipment that I would prefer them to have pointed out to us. Because if it were the Surprise or some other wooden boat, there, I think I would be able to infer they have enough equipment to do what they want with it because that's working with woodwork is very simple. But as you say, this is metal, so it's a little more. Uh, it's a little much.
A little tough.
yeah, so I agree they should have established a tool at some point. And then the flag that appears out of nowhere. I guess they had that on board the whole
I,
time.
Rose just had it in her
I just like.
pocket.
I guess they have a Union Jack. Sure.
Yeah, I suppose they do.
um,
Let's
one.
go Ryder, I guess.
All right. Well, one of the things I do like throughout the film is Rosie becomes a little bit more and more involved with the work Charlie's doing. So obviously, like Charlie's trying to doesn't want her to help him with the work on the propeller and stuff like that when he's trying to take it apart because it's difficult to do. But she ends up going down to help anyway. And then after the leeches bit, we kind of cut to her cutting down reeds. So presumably she's also going through something similar that he did with the leeches, which is what I guess I kind of liked is that eventually she also joined him to and put effort into trying to take the boat. So it's not just a one person show trying to survive. They're both putting in tons of effort, which I actually quite appreciate.
Yeah, and I like the scene where he has to go back in the water and he looks super reluctant, not wanting to do it. And she also is like, ah, man, sucks you have to do that, huh?
Yeah, which is why
uh,
again I think I would have
they're
taken that a
desperate.
little bit more differently if not for the scene that came right afterwards, showing her in the water with him cutting down like the leaves and the reeds that are in the way.
Yeah. Sprinks, any thoughts on that, or you want to jump to something?
Well, Crimson, I'll just agree with that the balance of the two working on it seemed fair, especially up to that point. Didn't expect it at the beginning of Rose, even though she's very goal focused on what her and Allnut are going to do, but then more hands on. So I think that's all fine. But I can jump to something else as well. I'll jump to the mosquito and how that's portrayed of being an overlayered particle effect or possible particle effect or like a transparent B-roll layered on top of the film, and that in probably the actual scene of Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn there's no bugs whatsoever and they're just slapping each other.
Hmm.
That must have been funny
And
in the
then
film.
And then being that what they have on hand for transition usage, the mosquitoes just fade into thin air.
As they sail away from the edge. Yeah.
It
Frank's
would have
question.
I think it
Uh,
would have worked better. One moment, Crimson. I think it would
yeah.
have worked better or more believable if the shot was on the opposite side of the boat and looking at the foliage of the jungle for the mosquitoes to fade. That way, it fades into the trees and not into the thin air of showing the river and the landscape kind of look.
That's a fair criticism because that is working what they had on hand.
Yeah, I was going to ask if this is more of an observation of how they did it, or if you are having a critique of it.
I see how they did it and what they have on hand and what they're accessible to do, and I think it was clever of them. The movie's very clever with the practical effects of what they had at the time to do, and how they portray mosquitoes without it being imaginary or just like one thing here, but like loaded. Like mosquitoes are crazy because that's believable, but with also what they have at hand, they could have shot it better, I believe, or more believable.
Okay. Um, yeah, I don't have much more to say about the scene that you didn't already say. Um, Given the time and the limitations, I think it's acceptable. I don't think it's bad. Um, your
What they could have done
recommendation
is have a
could
little
make
more
it a little
makeup for
better.
bites, though.
There's a certain level of balance with that, though, because you can it could kind of get cheesy looking if you have a lot of bites on a character.
Crimson, that's
Um,
true, it could. They do
so
cover the leech bites, though, with the shirt, which is good.
yeah, but I think it was okay. I would have liked more mosquitoes present, not like a full show of that, but them like slapping their arms every now and again whenever they're docked, because there would be mosquitoes everywhere, not just in this one random spot. Uh, so a more of acknowledgement of mosquitoes through the movie, I think, would be nice, and not just one acknowledgement.
Oh, I see, Crimson. Not like every animal here in Africa have their own segment. It's all of Africa.
Yeah, the mosquitoes would be everywhere, not just right here at this one spot. Um, and mosquitoes are also over the water. I mean, mosquitoes are born on the water, so um, even leaving shore wouldn't be 100% safety from mosquitoes. But that's okay. I mean, it made a dramatic moment, and I did like Rosie's reaction afterwards, where she apologized for her composure
Yeah.
breaking, because she has been very composed.
Yeah. One of the things I do appreciate is they have exposed their flaws to each other. In this case, she just happens to really, really hate mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I do have a question to pose that I'm not sure, because the scene, now knowing that those leeches were rubber, as Crimson brought up in the facts, and Rose applying quote unquote salt to Allnut to remove them because otherwise removing them could put a poison in if they were forcefully taken off. Was that salt used? Can salt become that powder like? Or is it some other thing like flour or powdered sugar or something just to show more of um a visual effect onto Allnut to show that like yes that is salt? Because if it was salt crystal, table salt kind of method or rock salt, it would just fall straight to the bottom of the boat and not show any marking.
I couldn't read what the container said on it. Um, so I don't know if it's specialized salt specifically for leeches. I mean, he goes through here a lot. It's his job as the mail guy. So he could have leech specific salt that's very fine and
But Crimson, that's
refined
a real
to
thing
where it
though, right?
sticks.
That's what I'm
What,
asking.
leech salt?
S- Salt can be that powdered of how they portray.
Yeah, if you
Yes.
make it fine enough, it can be that.
Yeah, there's definitely,
Like,
and
Okay,
you can
that's
definitely
what
get
I was
powdered
asking.
salt. There's a powdered salt that looks like more like sugar and flour than there is like the crystalline table salt that you're used to, I guess, with food.
yeah. So it is a realistic depiction of a form of salt. Yeah.
I
Okay,
think if I
thank
remember
you.
correctly, I could be wrong. I think powder salt is better for storing like meat and stuff like that, but I might be wrong. I have to double check. It's been a while since I've read up on powdered salt and its usages. outside of the leech
Yeah, I don't
that
know.
we've been.
Oh, Ryder for like meat curing.
Yeah, kinda. Or no, well, we use salt for storage and storing meat. It's not necessarily curing,
Preserving. Yeah.
preserving.
Well, Ryder, I think it could be for both
Yeah.
because the Oregon Trail and all those barrels of salted pork and for storage.
Yeah. I guess on the Reed's bit, so he takes off his shirt because the leeches. He hops in the water shirtless, and then the next scene he has his shirt on in the water. Uh, so there could have been a jump of time, so it might not be a continuity error. But it'd be weird that he'd put his shirt back on to go back into the leech waters.
Crimson it is a little odd. I did catch that as well. I also found it odd that they don't check his pants. It's just the shirt.
I'm sure he'd feel it if it was up his pants.
Pretty sure
I don't
that's.
know.
I'm pretty sure that's for
Sure.
censorship reasons. But
Probably.
Ryder, I'm sure, but still, I would have a hunch that it's all over him.
yeah, with the way it's portrayed, I also. It's weird that he doesn't at least like pat himself down.
Yeah, no disagreement. I mean, like with the censorship, when they were bathing, like, oh, is this a nudie movie? And then she comes out in like a gown. I'm like, oh, okay.
Crimson, they showed ankles.
Ankles and shoulders, man. Crazy stuff.
That Rose, what a harlot.
When she's like, look away, I'm like, oh my gosh, it is nudie. And then she comes out with a gown, and I'm like, really? I
And
mean,
Crimson, they
mean-
knew how to frame that. That's a good shot. They have the steam pipe right there on the boat blocking her.
yeah,
Turn her
yeah.
out.
I mean, the gown is probably thin, so I understand the need to look away. The gown is technically her undergarments.
Well, Ryder, I can tell you, Africa is not that cold. They didn't show that off.
Oh, I see. That took me a second.
I'm being a little PG-13 right here.
I gotcha. I don't know. I'm ready to pick up what he's laying down.
No, but I'm just shrugging because I made my point. So,
Ryder, it would be more prominent and maybe more censorship if this was Africa in snow.
oh, I don't get the reference, but okay.
Okay, never mind. We'll tell him later.
What?
Innocent him.
Okay.
Innocent Ryder.
I'm supposed to be the innocent one. All right. We haven't really talked about the Germans yet, and I feel like Ryder said he wanted to talk about the ending a bit. So do you want to go with German stuff right now?
Oh, sure. I'll talk a bit about the Germans. Their accent is funny, bad to me, but it like I said, it works in that the B movie quality kind of way. My bigger issue is the geography of where the fuck we are at the end, and where the boat went down, and where the African Queen went down, where the British shore is, because they just happened to drift closer to the British shore, I guess, during the execution and range enough for them to swim to survive. Theoretically, they could have died on the way, but we don't really. Just presumably they survived.
The Gators got him.
Ryder, we're in Southwest Africa, I think, by what the map showed. If the
East
map was
Africa was
showing
the
where they're
opening.
following the river, right?
They're going from East Africa to Southwest
To West,
Africa.
I
I would
guess,
guess.
yeah.
Yes. But yeah, no. My thing with the ending is that it's convenient that the African Queen is still afloat. It's convenient that its torpedoes are pointed up in a position enough to be useful. It's convenient that the Louisa runs into it at all, and it obviously it makes the Germans really incompetent because they don't notice a piece of wreckage that they're sailing towards, even though they're having a wedding on deck.
Well, Ryder, they never state that the Louisa is the unsinkable ship.
Oh, I don't have an issue with the ship being sinkable. My issue is just everything is conveniently placed in space and time for this ending to take place.
Divine intervention.
It is shrug. We have another word for divine intervention. It's called plot armor.
No, yeah, no disagreements. A lot had to happen in a particular way that is not easily explainable other than convenience. So,
I didn't really touch much on the faith aspect of the movie because I agree with you guys what you guys said earlier that it takes very much a back seat to the film. I don't feel like it leaves Rosie's character, but it's not the important facet to her character that's hyper focused upon. Despite the beginning, which you would think that it would have been a lot more prominent because of just, I guess, how we were introduced to her.
That's why I brought up the introduction of this character is very religious with the village and her brother and how she expresses herself to Allnut. But upon Allnut on the ship, she kind of just flips into patriotism mode.
Yeah, that might be how she wants to demonstrate her faith. But if faith was supposed to be a bigger aspect to this film, I think they should have played into it a bit more. Because I think I like her praying to try and save Allnut. It kind of makes sense, like they're at the end of their rope, so of course this is when someone would normally pray. Um, and then if they wanted to play into, like I said, if they wanted to do the divine aspect here for the ending, they would need to play up the faith aspect a little bit more for that to be an excuse, I guess, to portray the ending the way it is. Because as of right now, it's mostly plot armor and plot conveniences for how everything happens.
Also lucky that the Germans found them.
That's also
It
true.
was a nighttime storm,
It's also lucky as the
and they
Germans didn't
were
see them the first day when they
far
had a
away.
smokestack trying to get back into the reeds.
Very tall reeds. Yeah, the Germans are interesting characters. Or
They're,
I guess.
they're characters.
Crimson, is that a broad statement, or is that are you talking about the movie?
Oh, well, I'm gonna go with the movie. Because I don't know about really any Germans in my personal life to associate. So, um, yeah, the Germans in this, they're not too over the top. I mean, even with like the not realistic accents, they are like a subdued fake accent. They aren't. I was German. Blah! There's nothing like that. Nothing like that. Uh, so it's pretty subdued for a depiction of Germans, and they're not like Nazi Germans, but still, Germans are usually in negative light in the World War One and Two films.
Yeah, I think um, the film benefits as well because Germans come off as a bit more nuanced, if a bit stupid. Um, but I think the benefit of that, or the benefit of the film, is that it feels like they're fighting the wilderness more than they are like the Germans in a physical sense for most of the film. So it comes across as the Germans just being like the off-screen obstacle, like in the way that what's a good example? In the way that you would constantly hear about the Empire in Star Wars, even though you weren't necessarily like a part of the rebellion, it would still be something that's hanging over your head, whether or not you realized it. You know, it's kind of
Mhm.
what the role the Germans played for most of the film.
Spriggs got something.
Well, Crimson, let me look at my notes here. Yes, the rain aspect that shows multiple animals looking in the rain of the giraffes and the lions, and I think some elephants of kind of a somewhat of a sense of transitional usage of what's going on outside the perspective of Allnut and Rose is I I couldn't tell if the rain in those shots were different depending on the shots being used, if it was rain in the B-roll shot of the animal they're showing, or it's a B-roll shot of an animal that is like desaturized and then overlapped with a rain.
I'm leaning the overlapped one.
Yeah, I'm leaning overlap as well, based on the look of it. It struck to me like it wasn't actual B-roll footage of rain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they added the rain in post. Yeah, and it kind of reminded me of Lost World since we covered that of when they were entering the Lost World. We were getting a bunch of shots of different animals, like the sloth, the deer, the jaguar,
Oh,
all
Crimson,
that stuff.
the
The
1 second
monkeys.
like dinosaur.
The ones. Oh, fuck. No, not the ones I can answer. Oh yeah, saw a little connection there.
Uh, another something I didn't like that I thought could have been portrayed better was the quote unquote their first quarrel uh, about who would pilot the ship and try to take out the Louisa. I think it bothered me because it clearly wasn't their first quarrel.
Yeah, yeah, I had
That
the
was just
same
a weird
thoughts.
line.
Their first quarrel as a couple.
Yeah, I guess the phrasing just needed to be a bit better on that because
But
involving
I
Well,
like
satellites and
their
possibly
stuff.
arguments.
writer, possibly writer at the time. Maybe it's a little bit of the slang or distance of what Quirrell necessarily meant back then.
Yeah, I mean, I take it means their first argument, I guess, which they've had a couple up until this point.
Yeah, they.
So just a bit of nitpick.
Yeah, I think just saying this is our first quarrel as a couple
Yeah,
would.
that would fix it instantly. Like I think that's the implication. They just needed to tack on the extra couple words. So it's a little bit of a nitpick.
I did like their arguments though that they were making. Like Charlie needed to do the engine, so of course he has to do it. And her argument of she came up with the plan; it's her responsibility to follow it through.
And she's the one
Uh,
that kind of she says she's the one that forced him to do all this anyway.
yeah, she's learned enough to do it. So I think they both had good reasons to try to convince the other to stay behind. And then Rosie's reason for both of them going also makes sense. Okay, Sprinks.
Yes, I think it's leaned into an issue or just the plot armor of it, but kind of tackling on what I said earlier about the rain, the usage of that to show that the water is rising in the reeds and the mud to get the boat unstuck, and it had Allnut sleeping and trying to rest, and Rose is like putting him to bed, and then Rose sleeps next to him. I think it's a little bit unbelievable that the river or where they're at has risen that high and that calmly for the boat to move, opposed to if it flash flooded around them, they would have gotten wet and woken up to the situation because they have no tarp above them to cover themselves. If it was upstream and it was a higher chance of a flash flood, then it would have been a stronger current of waves upon hitting them, um, rocking the boat more rather than just gradually lifting it up off where they're stuck and moving it. And it's not like a situation where like a dam broke out and causes a big, you know, tidal wave kind of thing in the river or anything. It's just like slowly, which shows over time, and it made me question like how long are they asleep? If it's like an 8-hour thing, it's like can the water rise that high in a situation of that calmly of a current? And I don't know. It just seemed very questionable and all that. And I think it was just for the plot to move the boat along.
Well, in the reeds, there's not going to be too much of a current for the boat to catch, but I agree with the idea of them sleeping through the rainstorm because what they show it's heavy rain,
Yeah,
and when we see Charlie wake up, they are dry. The boat is dry,
There's no water
um,
in the boat. No. So I didn't
and
think the rain was anywhere near them.
and the only hitch is he references, "Oh, the rain pushed us." He says "rain," which means he knew it happened. So
yeah. Either there was
Oh,
a
for
time
my
skip,
thought.
or they just filmed it poorly. And I kind of lean towards it. I'm kind of in agreement that it's just weird that they slept through the rain. That's just how it was shot to me.
and he said they had to have been 100 yards away, which 300 feet. It's not too far, all things
Well, Crimson,
considered.
I can believe without a dam from them of their starting point of the village all the way down to where they are now, that the only thing that would raise the river would be rain. So it makes sense that his first thought is to rain, not like, oh, they broke the dam in a place we never went to, or something like something that, or like um, dumping more water, uh, man-made, something like that. So rain just seems believable in his statement of what he said to me. Um, but the boat being dry and no water in the boat, or didn't disturb them, or all in the rain. It just made me really think that it didn't rain near them at all.
Okay. Well, if it rained away from them, raising the whole water everywhere, as you were saying, then I don't have too much of an issue, I guess. Because you say flash flood, but we don't know how long it's been. And they are in the reeds, which would minimize any current that would be everywhere else that's happening in the Congo, I guess. um,
Crimson,
so
my
I got
my error with one of the two ways is being how close the reeds are to this ocean. I think that's the ocean, right? Not a lake of where the Louisa
No,
is.
that's the lake. The Louise is in a
yeah,
lake.
Okay, that's a lake. The water being risen to a lake would have to be at a certain current flow to be constantly risen that way before deforming back to original of where it was when they were in the reeds. So the movement of the water would have to be that high to keep it that high for the African Queen boat to move. However, by how calm it's shot and how far it's raised, is not a movement of current, but kind of a calmness of time, showing that the overall river has risen. So one of the two ways is an error to me.
oh, well, I guess we'll disagree on it then, because I don't. Assuming the whole thing rose from the rain with the calm waters is not too unbelievable to me. All right, let's go to writer next.
It's convenient that they found Rosie. I think this came up earlier in one of your points. The
Yeah.
Germans, I mean. It's convenient that they found him too. To be honest, in the middle of all that storm, they just happened upon him and rescued him. So I have no idea how either of them survived this. So definitely a lot of plot armor involved for the two characters here at the end.
Yeah, no gators got him. They didn't drown. They're too far for
Well,
yelling to really be a good choice.
Crimson, as we pointed out with the mosquitoes, each animal is kind of its own area.
Suppose
They
so.
get all 500 gators were in that one shot way earlier on.
Yeah.
Gators do prefer shallower water. So I don't really have an issue with them not being in the lake, but it's just convenient that they still both survive because it's a lake.
Not covered in leeches. No,
Crimson,
it's
that
more
is also
the
true.
reeds. Um, yeah, convenient they made it. Convenient they were found. Lucky that the German was totally fine wedding them. Very nice guy.
Bought them enough time.
Yeah, lucky. We'll go Springs next.
I couldn't tell. Thank you, Crimson. I could not tell if upon the shot of the Louisa showing it, that the next three, or I guess the first three shots showing the Louisa out on the lake, were the same shots reused until the fourth one.
I don't think they were.
I could not make out if the boat was moving at all. The fourth shot is different because the angle of the Louisa is now turned. But the first three, I couldn't make it out.
Yeah, I'm not definitive. I don't think it's the same, but it could be. You'd have to take pictures and overlap, I guess, if you want to test that theory.
Crimson, I would. Yeah. Fortunately, I did not.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh man, I have to go through all my notes. We'll go with the writer
Okay.
again.
Luckily, I have one in store. One of the tiny details I guess I appreciated the film is the reciprocal relationship that Allnut has with the African Queen. Um, when he says one of his miners got a screwdriver stuck in the boiler, but he hasn't taken it out yet because he actually enjoys kicking the boat. I actually quite like that. It's a little, what's it called? It's a character quirk in a way that I guess appreciate. They just it doesn't like give us much insight to their personality beyond like the he might just enjoy like the simplicity of having to do this because it gives him some simple work to do every time he takes the African queen out. But I just appreciate that as a character facet because it's unique, you know.
Right, or I
Yeah,
agree, and I go with that. That does show into his character of not fixing it.
Yeah.
yeah, I'd agree with that. Um, darn it, I had something in my brain. All right, let's go Springs again.
Oh boy, well, Crimson, I believe I only have one note left.
Wow. All right.
You're still buying him time.
Yes. All I really have is that even Allnut towards the end, with no understanding of if Rose is around or alive, and being told directly to his face, "Hey, if you're lying to us, you're gonna die." Allnut's still lying.
Yeah, and when he just says "Who cares?" too, several times.
Yeah. He's very prepared to die.
Yeah,
He's just kind of he's either accepted his fate or is just because he loved Rosie so much he's just ready to go.
I mean, we don't really know much of his life. Does he have a family or anything, or is he just a guy who mines and delivers mail? Is that the highlight of his life?
Well, Crimson, he might like poutine.
He might like poutine. Okay, is that a reference to something?
Crimson, he's Canadian.
Oh, okay. He's a syrup man. I don't know. But yeah, I like that he was committed to lying slash not caring at the same time, and also lying when it's blatantly obvious he's lying with Rosie. You just said her name. Wrong person. Feel like I should hang you twice. Which
uh,
is kind of amusing.
Kind of leads into another scene I quite like is if they're gonna die, they want the satisfaction of knowing what they were planning to do and how far they got. So them just kind of spilling the beans to more, for lack of better words, to the Germans about how they were planning to seek the Louisa.
Where did you get a torpedo? He made it. Tell him how you made it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were very proud of their near achievement at the time.
There was a gamble of long odds. So I just love how stupefied the German officer is at them.
Do you think they believed the story or not? The torpedo being built and all that,
That's the thing, right?
or was that just a long lie to them?
I was 50-50 on that, and honestly, it doesn't matter because they're British.
Oh,
I
they get
think
hung either way.
they were gonna get hung either way. So I think they were just their satisfaction was for our characters, not necessarily the Germans.
Crimson, I lean more that they didn't think it was real.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hence why they never warned the driver of Louisa or anything to avoid or find the ship. They just believed that it was sunk when really it wasn't. So the driver did drive right into the torpedo. And if the commanding officer, the Germans, didn't believe it to be or leaned that there's a possibility, I think they would have warned just in case to save their own skin.
Okay. There's a layer of logic to that, so I can believe that.
yeah, I can abide by that as well.
All
A
right.
detail I will go with the film that I think I'll give praise is even though the German accents in English are a bit out there, I do like that this is a film that actually has German speaking German and not entirely in English kind of thing.
Yeah, makes more sense with the times anyway too. That's how it would be.
Yeah, because you have the sniper guy telling the troops what to do in German and in the opening as well. Yeah, good balance between German and English.
Well, if this film was debuted in 51, so possibly being filmed in Africa itself, is this an American film?
It was
American actors
yeah,
or
yeah. It's an American film.
okay, so if it was taken back to America for the travel time from Africa footage and everything to get that done, and it came out in 51, could believe, made in 1950 or 1949, it started early production. That's only about 4 or 5 years after the end of World War II. I'm curious, how many of these German actors in this film do you think were like translators in the war?
That would be a cool detail. I got nothing.
I'm just thinking how close the movie release is to the war.
Yeah, I thought this was judging by like that. I assumed it would have been a British-made film more so than an American-made one, just because of I guess the patriotism aspect regarding the film. Um, but yes, I
Well, right, that
also
applies more to an American audience, but
yeah. So I also assume I also took that note of that with how close this would be to the war, in World War II.
Yeah, it's cool. Cool way to think about it. Uh,
possible. But
uh,
Crimson, in fact, you did not find.
no, nothing found for that. The question I was forgetting, but I remember now, was what was their plan after hitting the ship?
They were going to swim because they don't have a plan.
Okay, so the plan was jump off boat, swim to safety. That
Yeah.
was their
That
big
that was the
plan.
plan they said, Crimson, swim back to shore. Which is
Swim back to
why
shore.
I brought up earlier, like, end of the movie, what was up? Did they get to shore? Did they get captured again? Did they escape? Where did they go?
How do they know where? How do they know which shore is the one they were supposed to? Because they could have been all turned around, being inside the ship.
Wow, Ryder, it's like that's a line that Rose said.
I know.
It's the direction behind me, or whatever he said.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's
I
it's
mean,
just
he's
convenient that they
familiar
had
with
to.
the area,
Yeah.
right? And before it got blocked off by the whatever, Louisa.
Maybe. I don't know
So
how he would be selling his boat upstream, but
Well, Ryder, what he does is actually goes all the way downstream and then hits the ocean and, you know,
wraps around.
wraps around the
ah,
entire continent and then starts back up at the top.
that I would never have guessed.
That's why it takes him months.
Exactly. Glad we finally brought that back and figured it out. He goes around the entire the entire continent.
Jesus Christ. He's a more impressive sailor than I thought. Give Jack Sparrow a run
Ryder,
for his money.
could you believe he went back up the waterfall and back upstream up the rapids?
I don't know. I mean, he could borrow the Dutchman. It would work, I think.
Um, okay, so the big plan was that there wasn't really a plan
Yeah,
afterwards.
Crimson, the plan was to blow up the Louisa and go to shore
yeah.
and survive the explosion.
Survive the explosion, go to shore, and get help from the
Hope that
British
a British
Expeditionary
encampment is
Forces.
Because
nearby.
Allnut says like one man crew, Rose, you stay here on the east shore and wait for me. And she, fights back and says, "No, we're going to do it together." And he goes, "Wow, it is a two-person job." Oh, okay, fine. So even still, it was going to be like stay here on the coast and do nothing,
Yeah, which is weird because she would be staying on the German side of the coast anyway.
Yeah.
which
I
plays into did Allnut know that writer?
yeah, which plays into I don't know why they just didn't sail past the Louisa, like waited for it to leave on its patrol beat and then just sail to the British side of the lake. I don't get that either.
Writer, if that was to happen, then Allnut would have been a liar and not gone with what Rose's plan was, and also would have been a coward.
Yes, coward. She wants to sink the boat for the British.
Yes, but why not just go to the British Expeditionary Forces and let professionals do it?
Because they haven't thus far, so they're incompetent.
Because Raider, maybe Rose isn't that smart. Maybe she's manipulative and is just trying to make
Oh yeah,
Allnut.
oh yeah, she's definitely manipulative.
Allnut
That is
do
a
it.
character trait. It's just-
Yeah.
sorry, if you can't tell, a lot of my issues a lot more of my issues appear in this third act.
I can tell. Hmm. You can keep going if you have more, since Sphinx is tapped out.
Sure. I quite like the shot when the Louise is tipping and they're hugging each other on the mast where they're about to be hung to kind of steady themselves as they the ship goes over. Good shot. I enjoyed it.
There's something of the timing that isn't right, I guess, with the portrayal of how far in the shots the Louisa is to the
Okay.
capsized African queen. And going back to the hanging, the cut between that really ramps up the Louisa's speed to the explosion.
Really does.
Vroom, vroom, vroom. They got
And
places to be.
they're lucky that like they didn't trip or anything because I think they both had a rope around their necks when the ship gets hit.
Yes, they did. But it wasn't tight,
That's
which was
true. They
something I
haven't they haven't
noted.
gone that far yet. They were
They're going to hoist them up with a loose noose.
because they really just wanted to see them suffer.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
out of notes.
would they have hung them? I guess is more of a writer question. Would they have just is hanging them protocol, or would they have just shot him or done something else? Or
Well, Crimson, shooting takes equipment, takes bullets.
uh,
Throwing them overboard with heavy anything takes the equipment. Hanging them does nothing. Just throw the dead bodies when it's dead.
uh, it's if you're talking more protocol, it varied from captain to captain, but I can buy that they were going to be hung. They are very, very far from German industry at this point, so they might be wanting to try and preserve their equipment as much as possible.
okay. All right. I guess the last thing I have is just the reveal of Charlie's name being Charlie. This is a nice little detail because up to that point, she has just been referring to him by last name, and they
Mr. Allnut.
seemingly know each other through the mail for a while. So it's a nice thing to show them getting closer,
It's a
even
nice
though
change
it's
of
kind of minor.
Mr. Allnut and Miss to Charlie and Rosie.
Yeah, it's good. And then there's Deer, which I'm still stuck.
It's
uh,
pretty fast.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess that's it. Anything else before our ratings?
Crimson, that's all I have.
All right. Then let's start with Springs.
Oh boy. Well, I'll go with my objective. I'll do it this way. I'll start with my objective. I've touched on it a bit. I think I did with The Lost World a little. I've done it with Apple Dumpling, Casablanca, just kind of like older films and like what they have available to do with their film. So 1951 of the final product, what they had accessible at that time, to not demerit of like, man, the CGI they could have done on that model boat would have been immaculate. They didn't have that. Okay, so I'm trying to not fully change my objective scale for those who haven't heard those episodes we've covered before of kind of like older things, but I'm trying to tailor it to the film of its time. So right out the gate, I think the acting's pretty darn good overall of Humphrey Bogart, Katharine Hepburn. Their interactions, just the two of them, the situations they're in, the animal interactions from the mosquitoes to the hippo mockery to it, very, very, a lot of range, a lot of anger and emotions of, well, other way around, emotions of anger and childlike fun and humor and love, and they very capture that very well. The setting I think is very good, of the story they're portraying of what's going on overall. I think the set design looks good, but doesn't come across in the final product wonderfully. You can easily tell, but for what it is believable. Like the practicality of the model, the background, B-roll of the layering in the film of like the rain and mosquitoes, the transitional usages of the fade to blacks, all the time. I think very well done. I think the music is very good and very fitting, but doesn't overblend, and I think that's just something they necessarily couldn't do. But even the choice of not to do it um, is still fine. The way they do handle that, I think, is still complementary to one another, from the dialogue to the music, or the dialogue to sound effects, of like the argument on the boat with the animals echoing kind of off of what uh, Allnut is saying. Um, see, the costume design pretty good, fitting to the time. The let's see, the writing, very heavy-handed, very dialogue-heavy movie. A lot of exposition stated through that, of a lot of things going on. I think this movie could have had more show than tell, and the show seems a little more transitional usages. Um, so I think that could have been blended a little better. I think my biggest negative of this movie is its pacing. It feels like the first 20 minutes of this movie is a completely different movie than when they get on the boat, and that starts a whole different movie, which feels a little bloated at times, and then it's a very rushed 10-minute end. Um, and that just felt all kind of out of whack a little to me. I understand why it's done, and it helps with me focusing on thinking that the African Queen boat is the main character, and like the beginning is the prologue of like how we get introduced to it, and then all the way until the end of the death of the boat, and that ends the movie. And that's how it kind of felt to me, and I think that helps it a little more in its tonnage, um, through my perspective. Let's see, anything, the cinematography, there's some decently good shots. Nothing seemed bad, I think, of the shots. Everything pretty good, wides and tracking and panning and all that. um, yeah, I was kind of thinking of flipping, but I think I'm gonna give it a 7.5. Um, I think it's pretty good for its time. It's definitely comes across definitely dated, cheesy to today's standards, but I think of its time, it really was a crowd pleaser. Is my best guess in a theater. My subjective. Before I say it, Ryder and Crimson, did either one of you pick up something I've been doing throughout the entirety of this recording that I don't typically do in any other recording we've done before?
No.
Okay, nothing out of the
Maybe
ordinary
it'll
from
be
Crimson.
quite
Anything
apparent.
from you, Ryder?
I have a few guesses, but nothing concrete.
Okay, nothing concrete. Cool. I think to give a little more interaction and curiosity to our audience here and community, I will reveal what I did in the recap for this season. But what I did do, if you picked it up, does play into my subjective rating of this film. And it's a big pet peeve of mine of this film. I think it's also due to the time period of just when it's set, but it really got on my nerves and I was starting to hate it. However, I think this movie, it's the adrenaline of the action of the rapids and the snipers and blowing up and everything really got me engaged of like what was going on. But the whole love thing, I think, was a little bit of a tone shift between the two, and the dialogue did come across to me a little bit at parts a little boring or a little dragged on. Um, and again, this was also one I was thinking between two numbers, but I it's a good made movie of its time, but however, I just don't think it's the movie for me. Um, so I have this resting at a 4, and I think I'm content with giving it a 4. I was thinking of like, do I go lower? But it seemed a little more mean or ill-spirited, and it's not that I hate the movie in any way. It's just not necessarily fully entertaining to me, for my taste. So that's where I have it at.
Well, it's your subjective, so mean or ill-spirited. And if that's how you feel the movie is, it's how you feel the movie is. But okay. Um, a question I
I
should
will
have asked
say,
before the
oh,
ratings,
I will
but go
say,
ahead.
I had the if the movie didn't have the pet peeve that annoyed the heck out of me throughout the entirety of the movie, this I probably would have given it a 5. But because of the apparency of it, that's why I rested at a 4.
Uh, question. Well, actually, I'll save it for afternoons. Why not? Just remind me that I was going to say something.
Oh,
Okay.
now you're hinting at the
We'll
audience that they will never know.
it'll get there. Um, I guess I'll go next. So I will start with my subjective. I typically enjoy older movies. They're typically simplistic and more focused than I find more modern stuff. I feel a lot of modern stuff try to do a lot, uh, but older ones I find more refined, and this falls under that umbrella for me. I did enjoy it. I liked the romance between them. I felt like it was a natural progression of the butting heads, friction building into a pretty strong relationship where they're willing to die from the lack of the other one being alive. um, so I think I enjoyed it. I had pleasure watching it. So I have it at 7. It's good. It's good. Not too bad. Um, and I'd actually found humor in spots, mostly around the Germans. Objectively, my score has changed from the start of the podcast. I went into this with an 8, and I've ended with a 7.5. I think a lot of this, I did a lot of praising in the beginning about how a lot of the aspects of this film was done well, and I thought was kind of ahead of its time in the 50s. I thought some camera work was really good for the time. The visuals, visual shortcuts, I guess, for the miniatures, the decoy boat, the backdrop, since they didn't have green screens. I think it was all very well done with a couple that we point out, like the bright outline around the hippo part, kind of makes the background not look natural whatsoever. But it's bound to happen with a movie that's latent with a lot of fake backdrop. But I think they did a good job with it. I already praised the acting of Bogart, and I think um, I forgot her name. It's something Hepburn. She did good as well. Uh, all that is fine. The ending, I think, is the weakest part of this film. We, as Ryder brought up, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of conveniences with the African Queen boat. How did they puncture it with holes? Um, the convenience of it facing the Louisa and them hitting it and all that stuff we already covered. I think for a film that's primarily focused on one location, being the boat, it is a traveling location. Um, I think they did good. I mean, there's only like 2 cast members for the most part, 2 characters on one location. I think they kept it engaging enough. All the hurdles they did, the rapids, the fort, the reeds. There's enough variation in events. I guess the mosquitoes, uh, so where it's engaging, at least to me. And in the structure of a film, I think they spread that stuff out enough to not be too boring on paper. Sprinks said it was boring, and I think Ryder might have a similar sentiment. But in the structure of a film, I think they spread out enough stuff to try to keep it engaging. Uh, so 7.5 is where I'm at objectively. We'll go with Ryder next because that's all
Cool.
that's left.
Don't worry, Sprinks. I'm matching your 4 for subjective. Um,
Whoa.
yeah,
Interesting.
I'm kind of middle of the road on old movies. They're hit and miss. There are plenty I love, and there are plenty I don't. This one was trending towards. This is kind of middle of the road for me most of the way through. I think the ending really took it out of me, but I think what bothered me is no matter how objectively well crafted it is, I just didn't like the characters. It's just I didn't really feel much for Rosie and Allnut, despite I guess the film's attempts to make me care. Um, and it's just a personal thing. Their romance has fine moments, but there's plenty of times where I felt like it was too heavy-handed with, uh, I guess, the manipulation aspect of the relationship for me to enjoy it as much as I would have wanted. Um, I'm fine with the bickering and it slowly turning into a relationship. It just wasn't, I guess, my flavor of that for that I would typically enjoy. Um, and it really didn't take advantage of the time period in history of which I would often like to explore in movies and stuff like that. So I'm at a 4. I'm I think it's an okay movie. I'm not going to go out of my way to watch it again. Um, and I, quite frankly, I was bored the first half hour of the film, and I think they did do some stuff to pull me into the characters a bit about a half hour in. But at that point, for me, it was just like the film was playing catch up at that point to try and get me into the characters and stuff like that. So 4 feels fair as far as my subjective is concerned. My objective, um, pretty well crafted. Dialogue's okay. Uh, as far as the story is concerned, I didn't take that big of an issue with oh, what's it called? I don't have much issues with the show Don't Tell. They definitely utilize their tell pretty well as far as I'm concerned. I didn't find the dialogue to be particularly boring. I just found it to be dry, which is, I think there's a distinction in that is if boring is like the worst dialogue could be, I would view dry as the level above that. Um, in terms of characters, I think they're incredibly well written by the end. I think they are fleshed out. You get a good sense of who they are. The character arc that they've given each other, Rosie's become less proper. She's more adventurous. And Allnut's settled down from being a bit of a rough-edged scallywag into something that potentially become the best version of himself, being braver and more willing to do, uh, more willing to risk his life by the end for Rosie, which is, I think those are very sensible archetypal character arcs to give them. So they didn't really fuck that up much. Plot pacing is okay. I don't necessarily have an issue with the most of the pacing of the movie. I think it's off in a few spots, but it's not streamlined as far as pacing is concerned. But I think they did okay. I think Crimson, you said that they do enough to keep you engaged despite the simple setting of it mostly taking place on a boat. And I agree with that. I think the only one that felt really tacked on was the waterfall bit, even though I liked what came out of it, being they have to kind of MacGyver themselves a new propeller and steering gear. I think the Germans play a backseat to the plot, which is fine. They kind of feel like the background menace to everything, and it feels like the biggest enemy that they are constantly dealing with is the wilderness, which lends into the sense of this being an adventure film. So I don't take much issue with that. World building is fine. It's clearly laid out on a map, pretty much. You don't really move beyond the map, and then you have the additional like, oh, there's a waterfall here. It's weird that wasn't mentioned, or how it's tiny stuff like that. And then obviously at the end where I'm not really sure where the shore is based off of what we have. And the plan doesn't make much sense, which kind of damages the plot. The Germans are kind of dumbed down by it as well. And yeah, I think the ending is probably the weakest part of the film for me. I was bored in the beginning, but I recognized that it was still doing what it needed to get the story across. So funny enough, I'm matching everybody here. I'm at a 7.5.
Shocking. Ryder and I gave the same scores.
Wow. I know. You said you were going to bring something up, Crimson. You have a question there?
You're right. Yeah. Since this was a wheel spin sinister pick, how do you think he did for an adventure film? Think it ticks the boxes?
Good question. Good question. I think this is a weak sense of adventure film in comparison to a bunch of other adventure films. However, it is a very different take, or very film that I don't think necessarily would be on any of our radars of picks kind of thing to throw in. And I do applaud Sinister for that.
Yeah, because this is listed as an adventure romance. So, and for me, I do think it ticks the adventure box, especially as I ascribe to adventure films or location hopping, and there was a lot of like checkpoints of locations through this: the rapids, the reeds, the fort. So, yeah, I think it was a fine adventure pick.
I, funny enough, agree with both of what you said. Well, I agree with what you said, Crimson. I agree that it's an adventure film. I definitely ticks the adventure box for me. The part of Sprinks' statement that I agree with is that I feel like Sinister picked this to challenge our scale a little bit, and I feel like he succeeded.
Alrighty, with that, I'm good to we're ready to close out.
I have
Oh,
one last thing that I was
Okay.
just pondering on, which Crimson you brought up at the very beginning, of how Walt Disney adapted kind of the Jungle Cruise off of this movie. Picturing in my head the Jungle Cruise ride being on it kind of gives that a little. You know, you kind of had that boring beginning, waiting in a line. Then you got the cool Jungle Cruise with maybe a decent skipper, a couple few chuckles here and there, a lot of animal noises kind of overlapping people discussion, not a lot of people talking when someone's talking to the skipper, and then they stop for the noise to come through, and then you're kind of rushed off the boat and leave. I'm like, huh, kind of fits.
follows the pacing of the ride. That's funny.
Yeah, kind of does.
Well, the
I
ride follows pace of the movie.
And Jungle
uh,
Cruise is not a ride I would say is terrible, but is it a 4 out of 5 in the accompaniment of Disneyland? Maybe that might piss a lot of people off. That might have a lot of people cheering. I don't I don't know.
honestly,
well, it's more of an experience than a ride, really.
Yeah, I
Yeah, but
think
it's one of the original ones from '55.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you, Springs. I would, in the encompassing of all of Disneyland, there is, I think I would do 2/3 of the rides above this. So four feels about right.
It does make me want to watch the movie they did with The
Ooh, you're a
Rock
madman.
and see how that compares to this,
I can't
since that is
wait.
based off of this, kind of,
You're yeah, in a vein.
because the ride's based off of this, and the movie's based off of the ride. So curious.
All
That's a
right.
whole Google translation of movies right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, gentlemen, shall I read us out?
I believe so, Ryder.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for listening, audience, whether it be Spotify, Amazon, Castbox, Good Pods, iHeartRadio, Pocket Casts, and Samsung. And if you happen to be on our visual side of things, be it YouTube or Rumble, thank you for watching our PNG Tuber slideshow there. And please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe everywhere. Tell us how much you hate our opinions or how much you love them. As always, I've been a Geeky Writer,
I'm Crimson Maroon.
And I'm Springs.
and we'll catch you next time. Later, everybody.
Bye.
Toodaloo.